Hello and welcome to Double Feature Reviews. I'm Libby.
I'm David.
And today we're talking about Jane Eyre from 1943 and Rebecca from 1940. I specified the years because there are a lot of adaptations of both of these works. Which ones had you seen before, David?
Yeah, so I have not read the book Jane Eyre. Mm-hmm. I have not seen this film, Jane Eyre. I have seen, I think, the two major recent feature film adaptations of Jane Eyre, the 1996 Anna Paquin, Charlotte Gainsborough Zeffirelli film, and the 2011 Mia Wasikowska.
I believe it is pronounced Wasikowska.
Thank you, Wasikowska, directed by Fukunaga. And I've seen the 2006 Ruth Wilson BBC miniseries. That's all the Jane Eyre I've seen. I have read the book Rebecca, big fan of the book Rebecca, and I've seen the 2020 film.
Yeah, we actually talked about that on my YouTube channel.
That's right.
We filmed our live reaction to it.
Oh, did we?
Yeah, we did.
Oh, good.
So you can go re-experience that if you want to.
Cool.
We didn't really like it.
I think, well, we'll have to wait.
Yeah.
I think this version was better. I think that's pretty fair.
Yeah.
And I've also seen several other Daphne du Maurier film adaptations, but I haven't read any of her books. I've seen the Jamaica Inn adaptation that Hitchcock made before Rebecca, and I've seen the Frenchman's Creek adaptation that was made after Rebecca. I've also seen The Scapegoat with Alec Guinness, which was at the end of the 50s. Not a historical novel Rebecca is not a historical novel.
No, it was
right.
Published in 1936, and it's set within the last 10 years from when it was written.
Another contemporary novel from Daphne du Maurier.
Yeah. And you've seen My Cousin Rachel, the new...
I have seen My Cousin Rachel. That's a great point. I've seen My Cousin Rachel, not the earlier film with Olivia de Havilland, but the recent film with Rachel Weisz. Mm-hmm. No coincidence, of course. And...
You don't have to remember the character's name.
You don't have to remember the character's name. Very easy on set. I have also seen the tangentially but clearly related work Obsession, which I believe is from 1936.
Okay.
Which is a Bronte biography about the full set of siblings, starring Olivia de Havilland, which I'll admit it colors somewhat my experience of these books, especially because in Obsession, Olivia playing Charlotte is pretty heavily implied to be Jane Eyre.
Okay.
But we'll get into that. We're going to get into that. Now, I know that you are big fans of both of these works, so I'm guessing you have a longer list than me.
Yeah, this is going to take a while. We'll start with my experience with the books. Before I got on BookTube, before I even started watching BookTube and was exposed to all these new wonderful books out there, in high school, early college, I would say I had about a dozen, maybe 20 books that were my books. And those were the books that I read. I just read the same books over and over again. And a lot of them I had in physical copy and in audiobook. And so, just whichever medium strikes me at the time, that's what I would read.
I do remember when we first started dating around that time period that you talked about Jane Eyre and Rebecca a lot. And you've, I believe, reread them in front of me multiple times during the first few years of our relationship. So this checks out.
Yeah. So in high school and college, I did a lot of reading, but I only really read 1 to 3 new books per year. And most of those were by authors that were already sort of in my stable. So I've read Rebecca and Jane Eyre certainly double digits number of times. If you count audiobooks as reading, I've definitely cleared that. I was also in the LibriVox dramatic reading of Jane Eyre. I did not play anyone important. I played first class Lowood Girl.
Do you mean Lowood Girl or nice Lowood Girl?
I truly don't remember any of this at all. I also played Hannah, who is a character who is not in this film. She is the housekeeper for the Riverses, for people who've read the book.
Is she mean or is she nice?
She's both.
Oh.
David, this film has tricked you into thinking that women are only mean or nice.
The film was very explicit about that. To be fair, to me, the film has been pretty upfront about that idea.
Yeah, Charlotte Bronte would not have been happy with this film at all. And we'll get into it. So anyway, so that's my history with the books. For Rebecca, I did read the book before I saw any adaptations. For Jane Eyre, I'm pretty sure my first exposure to Jane Eyre was the 1997 Samantha Morton and Ciarán Hinds ITV movie, which I watched. My aunt had a copy of it, and she lives in California. So at some point I went over to visit, and I'm from the East Coast, so I was waking up 3 hours before everybody else. So I just sort of would watch a movie every morning. I just grabbed something from her shelf and watched it before everybody else woke up. So, and one of those was that Jane Eyre. That's definitely not the best Jane Eyre. I would say I've seen basically all of the major productions from the past 50 years. I've seen the 1983 BBC miniseries with Zella Clark and Timothy Dalton, James Bond. I have seen the Zeffirelli film from 96. I've seen the 2006 Wilson Stevens BBC one. I've seen the 2011 Wasikowska Fassbender one, and then a couple of more out there ones. I have listened to the 1994 British radio adaptation, which stars Sophie Thompson and again Ciarán Hinds. He's played Rochester twice. I also saw a broadcast of the National Theatre's stage production of it from 2015.
This list is so comprehensive and substantive that it's jogging memories in my own head.
Okay.
And it's helping me remember that I've actually seen two other Jane Eyre-related movies that I had sort of forgotten about. And one is the adaptation of Wide Sargasso Sea, which is the prequel... No, sorry, prequel... Yeah. What's the term? Subversive retelling of one of the characters from Jane Eyre. Yeah. Have you ever read Wide Sargasso Sea?
No, and I'm not going to.
Oh, that's right.
You will never convince me that Edward Fairfax Rochester is bad.
Oh, I see.
I'm not interested in this revisionist, actually he's a bad guy business.
Well, this is going to be a very interesting podcast then.
And I wouldn't say that any of the adaptations of Jane Eyre I've seen are the definitive adaptation. There is definitely a best adaptation, which is the Ruth Wilson, Toby Stephens one. I think...
Yeah, I watched that one because Libby said that was the good one, so I watched that one.
I think if you're trying to pick an adaptation of a classic novel that has been adapted many times, two things to consider. One, I don't know what was going on and who was in charge of what, but for some reason, the BBC between 1995 and 2011 was putting out just absolutely fantastic classic novel adaptations, Austen, Dickens, Bronte, one after the other. So if you can find one of those are all great. The other thing to consider is you want something at the highest point of the intersection between runtime and budget per hour. Just pick that one.
That checks out for a grand book adaptation.
Yeah. A lot of these Jane Eyre adaptations are movies, and they're like 90 minutes to 2.5 hours long. And unfortunately, you can't actually tell the story of Jane Eyre in that amount of time.
Yeah, I've never read the book Jane Eyre, but I do think that the 90-minute to 2-hour story makes a better cinematic experience than the miniseries. I thought the miniseries was well made, and I believe that it's very evocative, but I actually thought that the Wasikowska interpretation, I think that was actually, I enjoyed that more than the BBC miniseries.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely had a higher budget per hour.
Yeah, that one is very, I guess, famous for opening with Jane Eyre's wandering around the moors closer to the end, which I just thought was so arresting and really drew me into the story and set the tone and the aesthetic for Jane's bigger story of wandering through society and not finding anywhere where she can be safe and having to continually move around in fear. So I thought it was good filmmaking.
It is good filmmaking. I'm so much more interested in your opinion once you've read the novel.
That's a very fair point. Fukunaga is a director I like a lot, so I'm not surprised.
Since you also talked about other related things,
let's get it out of the way.
I want to take this opportunity to say, because I don't know when I'll get another opportunity to say it. Jane Eyre has been adapted so many times. You know what hasn't been adapted so many times? Villette. It's also by Charlotte Bronte. The book is so good. It maybe is a little bit harder to adapt than Jane Eyre. The character is clinically depressed. But as far as I'm aware, there has only been one film or TV adaptation. It was made in the 70s, I believe, by the BBC. It was like a BBC studio drama. And it has been lost.
I know we're going to come back to Villette when we get into the actual story of the writing of the book and everything. But yeah, I just want to say that I really agree with you. I would love to be able to find that 1972 Villette. And I've looked hard for it, and I don't know where it exists. I bet you $1 the BBC has it, though. Do you know that it's lost?
I can't remember. It's been like a year since I really strongly looked into this. I will say, if you love Villette as much as I do and you really want an adaptation, there is actually a pretty good radio adaptation.
Okay.
I've listened to 2 radio adaptations. One starred Anna Maxwell Martin, who is a great actor, and I was like, well, obviously I'm going to like this one. The production was actually really disappointing. It was basically an abridged audiobook with some of the scenes acted out, which I didn't need. But there is another one, I think it's from the 90s. I don't remember who was in it, but it was a British radio. I'll put a link to the YouTube one in the show notes. And it really effectively uses the medium of sound to tell the story.
The BBC series has been quite well reviewed. Mm-hmm. So if it's lost, it's a shame.
Anyway, enough about Jane Eyre. Let's talk about the Rebecca adaptations I've seen. Unlike Jane Eyre, there is a definitive production of Rebecca. It is the 1997 ITV production starring Amelia Fox, Charles Dance, and Diana Rigg. It has the best casting of any movie ever. Everyone is perfect.
It's received a lot of good reviews.
Yeah. It also has Faye Dunaway as Mrs. Van Hopper, playing a very sort of glamorous, but still very American.
Not necessarily how she's often portrayed, for example, in this movie. David O. Selznick was not happy that she was cast. Mm-hmm. She was not an experienced actor, and this was her second major role outside of community theater, and she got a lot of negative notes, and yeah. So the actor in the 1940 review of 1940 adaptation of Rebecca that we are reviewing didn't get good notes either. So can't win.
Okay, yeah.
Unless you're Faye Dunaway.
Yeah,
apparently.
So Faye Dunaway crushed it. There's one shot after she's been embarrassed where she, to sort of cover it up, she takes a swig from her drink, and it's like a champagne glass, it's a coupe that's clear, so you can see her teeth, and she just does a very teethy, she's sort of biting the glass. That's a great shot.
She doesn't even know how to drink champagne, right?
Well done, Faye. I highly recommend that one. It's 2 90-minute episodes, so it's 3 hours long. Yeah,
it's basically a movie. So, it's not really a miniseries.
Yeah, I got it from Netflix on a DVD back when they were mailing DVDs. And I think the version I had cut out the credits in the middle, so I just experienced it as a 3-hour movie. And that basically is enough time to tell Rebecca. They had to cut out the grandmother scene, but they basically had everything else. And then I have seen the 2020 Netflix adaptation with Lily James, Armie Hammer, and Kristen Scott Thomas. And then my second favorite after the 97 one is the comedy short from That Mitchell and Webb Look, which is kind of like a BTS sequence. Someone who's playing a film critic is talking about how either Hitchcock or Selznick said, look, if the book is called Rebecca, the main character has to be Rebecca. So there was a big script rewrite where instead of being the second Mrs. De Winter, our main character is the first Mrs. De Winter, and she will never live up to this imaginary person who is going to be the second Mrs. De Winter. David Mitchell plays Mrs. Danvers on a sliding floor panel, and it's great.
Yeah, it is a very funny bit, and whenever I think about it, I remember when I first watched the bit, I got kind of excited because I was like, oh wow, this is going to be an adaptation of Rebecca from Rebecca's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
What does Rebecca think about all this? But it actually wasn't that. It was a very different story, not about the actual Rebecca character, which is kind of a shame. I want to watch that movie /
So someone has written that book, and I'm
sure.
not reading it. It was actually approved by the Du Maurier estate.
Oh, interesting. I know there are both of these books have so many.
Not by Daphne. Daphne was dead, so I don't know what that means. I'm not reading White Sargasso Sea. I might read, I think it's called Rebecca's Tale. I might read it. Frankly, it doesn't sound very good.
Yeah, both of these books have a lot of parallel accompanying commentary novels, so I'm not surprised to hear that, but I am surprised to hear that the estate approved it, but after the death maybe makes more sense. Mm-hmm. But yeah, and I also, thinking back to the Mitchell and Webb sketch, this film has been parodied a lot. Yeah. It's not like Mitchell and Webb. From the beginning, obviously, it has some big characters. Mrs. Danvers has received a lot of parody attention throughout the years because she's doesn't have emotion on her face, and she dresses scary, and she's a lesbian. Those are basically the 3 Mrs. Danvers jokes we got, and we've repeating them consistently for the last 70 years.
And one last piece of media I've experienced that is relevant here is I have read Daphne du Maurier's biography, The Infernal World of Branwell Bronte, which is a biography of Charlotte's brother, but we also include some information about Charlotte in there, including her, with no evidence, just sort of blasely saying that Charlotte Bronte was a lesbian, which, you know, she's not the last person I would believe is a lesbian in history, but I'm not super convinced. She was pretty clearly in love with a man at one point. And also, this is especially weird, given that Daphne du Maurier, a lot of people have said she was a lesbian or at least had sex with women. And she's like, no, definitely not.
Well, she talked a lot, some in public, but especially in her private writing, about her desire to be a man, and how she was unhappy with her feminine life. I don't want to guess how we want to connect those dots around, but it seems clear that du Maurier probably would have considered herself some type of queer had she been living in 2025. I think that's a fair thing to say, even though
I'm not exactly sure what flavor, but
she would have interpreted that. I think it's quite possible in living in 2025, her whole life experience about this issue would have been so different, she may have a really different perspective on it. Several of her novels feature characters who are frustrated by the social confines of womanhood, but sometimes it maybe seems like even more than just the purely social, perhaps. And, for example, a lot of her books feature characters who lionize Joan of Arc as a historical figure. And I find it interesting that in this 1940 adaptation, in fact, the first costume that our heroine sketches for herself is Joan of Arc. That was her first idea, and we see her reject it, and I think we might even read the lines enough to say, oh, this is not feminine enough. And in the 1959 film Scapegoat, I don't know if it's also true of the book that it was based on, the protagonist is a young girl, or one of the protagonists is a young girl who wants to be a man and really admires Joan of Arc. So this tends to be something that comes up in her work. Have you seen Jamaica Inn or Frenchman's Creek, or read either of those books?
I've read both of the books. I haven't seen any adaptations. I didn't think Frenchman's Creek was very good, so...
Yeah, I mean, Frenchman's Creek, the film it's a Paramount film, but I think we would call it an MGM-style film. It's very bright Technicolor from 1944, and that's pretty. And it's a fun, silly romance. It reads like a paperback romance novel.
Yes, Daphne du Maurier said Frenchman's Creek was the only romance novel she wrote. She really doesn't like people calling Rebecca or My Cousin Rachel romances. For a lot of people, the first Daphne du Maurier they read is Rebecca. And then you'll often get directed to My Cousin Rachel. And unfortunately, those are head and shoulders above all of the rest of Daphne du Maurier's works, as far as I'm aware. Like, those 2 books are masterpieces, and everything else ranges from a fine literary fiction experience to actively boring.
Have you seen the My Cousin Rachel with the Olivia de Havilland version, which I've not seen?
So I watched like the first 15 or 20 minutes and hated it. So I didn't finish it.
Interesting.
Now, I think I just got to when Olivia shows up, because Richard Burton plays Philip in that one. So It's mostly Richard Burtoning around. And I was like, I don't love this. Maybe Olivia will save it. I watched one scene with Olivia, and I was like, she hasn't saved it. I'm out.
Yeah, I think it's not totally surprising that in our discussion here, we've continued to mention the name Olivia de Havilland several times. And I think we're going to have to call out now, because it's definitely going to come up more, that Olivia de Havilland, extremely famous and successful actress from the 30s and 40s. And she is Joan Fontaine's real-life sister, who is Joan Fontaine is the person who's going to star in these two movies that we're eventually going to start talking about, Jane Eyre and Rebecca. So that is her real-life sister, and the real-life drama of their story is also part of the story of these movies and their adaptations. So we're gonna have to get into it some there too.
Are you also familiar with Orson Welles' personal background? Because I think that
Which
may also
do you mean,
his
please?
dad's stuff.
I don't know what you're referring to.
Oh, there's a lot of...
that his dad died and he inherited all his money? Or do you mean something more specific than that?
No. Do you want to know about his dad's stuff now?
Let's do it. Break the
So,
rules.
Orson Welles' father died when he was 15.
Right.
His dad was an alcoholic. He died of liver failure. And some number of years before that, Orson Welles said, I'm not going to hang out with you, Dad, until you get your life back together.
Yes.
So he didn't see his dad for the last couple of years of his
goodbye.
life, and he felt really bad about it for the rest of his life.
I am aware of that. I'm not totally sure how you are connecting that to this
Mr.
story.
Rochester also has some tough dad stuff.
Does he?
Yes.
Is that in the movie?
I can't remember.
I don't think that's in the movie.
His dad arranged the marriage to...
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
That's true. Yes. Well, as I understand it, Orson Welles and his father had, in some ways, a very affectionate relationship. So Orson Welles' father was really, really rich. He invented a bicycle lamp part. And he...
Sorry, a bicycle lamp?
Yes, he invented...
A lamp that goes on a bicycle.
A lamp that goes on bicycles.
Okay.
And it was a really good lamp that goes on bicycles, and he had the patent on it. And so it was so successful that his father never worked again after that and became a severe alcoholic. And his mother left his father, and his father slowly started to kill himself. And so Orson Welles, as a young teenager, moved in with his father, kind of to hang out with his rich dad, but also because his dad needed a caretaker to try to keep him alive. And so he kind of was his dad's dad for a while. And then, as you said, when he reached his mid-teenagers, he kind of got bored of that, and I think was really hurt by his father's behavior. So yes, I am familiar with that story.
Yeah. So in that case, he has a mentally unwell person that he feels an obligation to take care of.
I think the relationship sounds more like Rochester's relationship with Bertha than with Rochester's relationship with his dad. I think his dad wasn't going around arranging marriages or anything like that. And I think they had a affectionate, if troubled, relationship. Of course, it is the sad fact, that his father died that led Orson Welles to inherit this fortune at a young age, which basically is the reason why he's so successful. I mean, obviously he's a very intelligent and capable person, but this was someone who from a young age was a millionaire, got to make his own lifestyle, travel down Europe, hanging around in intellectual things and taking wild stabs.
Very Rochester-y.
Very good point. Taking wild stabs at various artistic endeavors as a way to practice his skills. So, he's a smart person, but, he's a dilettante heir, and that's really where his success comes from.
Okay, so 30 minutes into the podcast, David. This is going to be a long one. Are you ready to talk about our title for this double feature?
I think so.
Okay.
I think so.
Do you want to go first? So
I'll go first.
I have two that I really like. So I want you to go first so I can pick the one that is more different than yours.
Got it. All right. So my title is Pretty Behind the Fog? ? And I think partially this is just a reference to the mystery of the stories from an internal psychological perspective. These are both characters who, in some ways, have things about themselves that they're very proud of and they're very certain about, but also have a lot of self-doubt and are constantly criticizing themselves and who feel like they're not attractive enough for their rich husbands, to put it in a very direct way. These are both movies that make extensive use of fog, both as a aesthetic technique and as a literary device to help us understand how distant and uncertain all of these characters are. I think that's a good summary of the title.
Okay, so that makes it clear which one I'm picking. So I wanted to be really careful that I was picking a title that would work for these two specific films and not Rebecca and Jane Eyre, the stories or the novels. So I have gone with Joan at a Window, referencing the fact that Joan Fontaine is the star of both of these films. And there's a lot of shots of her looking out windows that are pretty consequential.
Checks out. Yeah, I think for my title, the way I would relate it very specifically to the films is that I think especially for Jane Eyre, and we're going to have to, I think a theme of this episode is going to be one of those David is really cynical episodes. So let's just go ahead and set that tone early. Because another interesting aspect of these adaptations is how they choose to Hollywoodize their female stars. I think this especially stands out in Jane Eyre, and I know we're going to get to that soon. The fact that Jane Eyre in the book is so aggressive in describing herself as someone who's plain. And there's nothing wrong with not being the world's most attractive person. For example, I am not the world's most attractive person.
Honey.
So, I can understand that that's part of life, and that's just fine.
In fact, almost everybody is not the world's most attractive person.
It is thus interesting, and we can discuss how exactly it's interesting, that Jane Eyre in this film is played by Joan Fontaine.
This angel.
Who is considered, at the time, maybe the world's literally most attractive person.
Yeah.
And we need to talk about that as a aspect of this adaptation. Even though it's a little bit distasteful, if we skip over this aspect, we are ignoring a big and important discussion.
David, they drew her eyebrows on thicker than normal. I did mention this at the end of the last podcast. These are both stories with a big twist that you honestly don't want us to tell you. You want to experience it from the author or from ideally a good adaptation. So if you haven't been spoiled by just like society already, or if you haven't already seen one of these films or read the books, I suggest that you do that. But if you're sallying forth anyway, David is going to do a plot précis if you want a refresh or to be just told what happens.
Excellent. So, Jane Eyre is a romantic drama. It's shot in a shadowy, controlled, dramatic style. The story is that a virtuous and strong-willed 19th century young lady survives a brutal orphanage and finds herself in a mysterious romance with her brooding and wealthy gentleman employer. In the first scene, narration implied to be from the original novel introduces Jane's miserable life living in a tiny room below the stairs with her cruel aunt, uncle, and their overweight son.
No uncle. Uncle's dead.
Oh, thank you. I was trying to do a Harry Potter reference. I don't actually know enough about Harry Potter.
Also, the room she's in is not confirmed to be under the stairs.
We see it in the first shot of the film.
There are stairs?
Yes, there are stairs, but that's part of it. She lives in the room under the stairs.
Okay.
Sad child. In the final scene, after Jane Eyre's fiancé's real wife sets their mansion on fire and jumps from the roof, Jane returns to find him blind. But then her narration tells us they get married, have a child, and he regains his sight. Rebecca is a romantic mystery drama. It's shot in a shadowy, sharp, and expressive style. The story is that a sweet and self-conscious 20th century young lady breaks out of a dreadful traveling servitude and finds herself in a mysterious romance with a brooding and wealthy widower. In the first scene, narration from the novel tells us about her dream remembering of Manderley, and she tells us that the story actually begins in the south of France. In the final scene, as the ceiling collapses onto the menacing Mrs. Danvers, our heroine finds her now loving husband Maxim for a finally relaxed embrace.
And who actually made Jane Eyre happen? One person we haven't talked about at all is the director. Robert Stevenson, no relation. He's a V. Stevenson. And it is written by Aldous Huxley. Yes, that guy. With Robert Stevenson, the director, and John Houseman, based on the novel by Charlotte Bronte. It stars Joan Fontaine as Jane Eyre, Orson Welles as Edward Rochester, Margaret O'Brien as Adèle Véron, Peggy Ann Garner as child Jane Eyre, an uncredited appearance by baby Elizabeth Taylor as Helen, Henry Daniel as Mr. Brocklehurst, Hilary Brooke as Blanche Ingram, and John Sutton as Dr. Rivers. Not a character in the novel.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, I liked him so much. He was so great.
He's supposed to be a woman.
Rivers is a character in the book, but it's a woman.
Okay, so Dr. Rivers is an amalgamation of, we'll say, 3 characters that appear in the book. They are Dr. Lloyd, Miss Temple, and St. John Rivers. Now, he has the name from St. John Rivers, so I assumed he was mostly going to be based on this character, which when he showed up at the beginning, I was like, this is going to make no sense. He actually is mostly filling the role of Miss Temple.
Okay. Well, yeah. His very sappy bit at the beginning where he tells Jane that duty is what you have to do even when you don't want to do it. And, it's not every woman that can face the world single-handed, but you know what right is and you stick to it through thick and thin. I really loved that part. And I found it touching and, though silly, powerful and effective advice for young people. Mm-hmm. So, I guess it's a shame that they had to condense these different characters into a character who was very flat, but had a lot of interesting things to say.
Yeah, I was really concerned. I thought he was going to come in and be St. John at the end. And I was like, wow, this character is going to be really incoherent.
St. John is the nice boy that she doesn't marry?
I mean, quote unquote nice boy.
Oh, turns out
he's incredibly awful.
I see. Got it. This just like that Jane Austen one where she marries a sailor.
Persuasion?
Probably.
What's like Persuasion?
Well, she has the nice boy that she's supposed to marry, but then it turns out that he's bad. And then there's the gruff, weathered, big guy who's too not, cool.
I don't think it is appropriate to describe Captain Wentworth as gruff and weathered. Although,
that's what he was like in that movie I saw. But I could be wrong.
I will point out, the man who played Mr. Elliot, the quote-unquote nice boy, in the adaptation of Persuasion that you saw, also played St. John in the Zeffirelli film.
Right. Yeah.
Which you saw, so I think that's where
that actually, when I watched the Zeffirelli film, I kind of thought, oh, wow, he really reminds me of the guy from the Pride and Prejudice, because he's playing the same character. Sorry, from Persuasion, because he's playing the same character, and apparently is literally the same person, so it all checks out.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought the sailor guy in the Persuasion movie, what year was that Persuasion movie that I saw?
95?
Okay, in the 1995 Persuasion, I think he had a certain gruff, weathered
Do you know who that is?
Style. I don't know who that is.
That's Ciarán Hinds.
Oh, wait, that's Rochester from all the... Okay.
That's Rochester twice.
Well, then I'm just going to say this checks out.
There are only 12 British actors.
Because I was like, wow, that guy really brought big Mr. Rochester energy. Yeah, he did bring... Okay, so it was literally St. John Rivers and Mr. Rochester in that Persuasion.
Yes, you're getting him between his two Rochester performances.
Well, then I stand by my analysis.
We are, I promise, going to try to just talk about these two films. We're going to try really hard.
Can I set the context? Well, I think it has to be said, and I think, Livy's probably got to really start it off with our production section here, because this is an adaptation of a book by Charlotte Bronte. So tell us a little about how this book came to be.
Yeah. So, a number of elements from this book are pulled from Charlotte Bronte's life. So, Charlotte Bronte was the third of 6 children. Her younger sister Emily, and her 2 older sisters, Mariah and Elizabeth, did attend a very Lowood-like school where there was a typhus outbreak, and her 2 older sisters did die.
Was it for orphans and indigent people or not?
I believe it was for clergymen's daughters.
Okay, so some sort of semi-charitable institution.
I'm not sure what the financial situation was. Okay. The Brontes were by no means living in poverty.
They were very middle class.
Yeah, they were extremely middle class for the Victorian era. They might be the exact middle of the social ladder, but poor people were extremely poor.
And there were a bunch of them.
Yeah, so I certainly would not want to swap lives with Charlotte Bronte. So her 2 older sisters died, and she and Emily were pulled out of school. So I honestly think the Lowood scene, I feel like, is actually kind of cuttable, because it actually has a quite subtle effect on the overall characterization of Jane Eyre, which I think is difficult to convey in film. So if I was told I had to do Jane Eyre in 90 minutes, I'd first of all say fuck you. And then if I had to do it anyway, I'm cutting Lowood.
So just to be clear, you're cutting Helen entirely.
I'm cutting Helen entirely.
Because I think Al just might say, well, this is where we learn that, Jane is not just strong-willed, but that she is virtuous. That she is loving and caring, and that she's willing to sacrifice for others.
That's not a point that Charlotte Bronte is attempting to convey about Jane.
Interesting. That's definitely a point the movie wants to make about Jane.
Yeah, because the movie is sexist. So yeah, she had that experience. All of her sisters did work as governesses. Their father was not making enough money to fully support the family. And their brother kept being a drunk fuck up. So the sisters did all work as governesses. Emily and Charlotte did go to Brussels for like a year or two. Emily left because she absolutely hated it. Charlotte stayed and did fall in love with a married man. This story was more inspirational to her first novel, The Professor, and the, one might say, much improved rewrite of The Professor, Villette. The two books are very similar, and Villette is so much better. But Charlotte Bronte does have a vested interest in saying, hey, sometimes you're in love with a married man and you just want to live happily ever after. Can I have this, please?
Olivia is born almost exactly a year before Joan. So they are very close in age. And Olivia's mother, both of their mothers, was a somewhat successful actress in her own time. And she was very excited that Olivia also wanted to become an actress and really encouraged her to do so. And then when Joan decided that she also wanted to become an actress, their mother was very upset by this. Their mother was said to be much closer to Olivia than Joan and really wanted Olivia to inherit their family legacy. In fact, their mother specifically forbid Joan from using the de Havilland name as an actress because she wanted to sort of save that name for Olivia and wanted Olivia to be the de Havilland actress. So Joan got the backup option and took her mother's old stage name. And part of that rivalry was that Olivia considered herself to be the much better actress than Joan was, and considered herself in some ways to be the real artist and person with performing skills, while Joan was kind of just the pretty one. And Olivia often felt frustrated as Joan's career grew and she got a lot more attention. Then she kind of felt like Joan is just a model who stands in front of the camera and says a line, whereas Olivia, is the real actress. And this led to a lot of tension between them, famous snubs at the Oscars when various people won various awards and different ways. And in their early life, they were separated. And Joan was sent to live in Japan, ostensibly for medical reasons, and maybe that's true, although it may have been because Olivia and her mother really didn't want to spend that much more time with Joan. So the story of a girl who sees herself as too plain, perhaps, which is a really rough way to describe the incredibly beautiful Olivia de Havilland, does have a connection. And the people in these different adaptations of these novels can appreciate, I think, that tension. It's a fact.
Yeah, I mean, it is a really common problem with Jane Eyre adaptations that Jane and Rochester are just too attractive the vast majority of the time. These people are both very ugly. Rochester, at least, is described as very ugly. Jane could be very ugly, but could also just be so nondescript that you never notice her.
Well, I've definitely heard a fan theory, perhaps we can see why fans might want to have this theory, that Jane is actually super hot. And she's just so down on herself. And it's just so, if only she could just accept herself, then she'd know that she was hot the whole time.
That's not the problem with Jane. Y'all have confused this character with the main character of Rebecca. Yeah, so I think one of the reasons I like the 2006 BBC adaptation so much is that I think Ruth Wilson and Toby Stephens are...
They look like basically normal people.
The ugliest people who have performed these roles. Not that they're ugly, but like they don't really put makeup on Ruth Wilson. They give Toby Stephens a bad hairdo, and the way they are filming, I don't know, lights, camera, whatever, really emphasizes the texture of his skin. He's also not that tall. All these Rochesters are too freaking tall, and his coat is cut to make him look broader.
He is described in the book as a big guy.
So he is explicitly described as not particularly tall, but crazy wide. He's got the broadest shoulders of anyone Jane has ever seen. She's seen 20 whole people.
You like Rochester, the tall, kind of plain-looking guy, the not tall, kind of plain-looking guy with broad shoulders. That's the type of guy that Libby is kind of into.
I just really explicitly want to state that I think...
That reminds me of the physical description of someone else.
There are people who look less like Edward Rochester than you.
Okay, I'm just figuring it out.
I just want to... I'm about to do a lot of defense of Mr. Rochester
I see that.
in this podcast. I am aware that a lot of people are going to be like, Libby, you just think this type of character is hot. You're just into the broody bad boy. And for a while I was like, I don't know, I guess that's true. Everyone's saying it, whatever. Then I realized an extremely important thing about myself. I'm not attracted to Mr. Rochester. I relate to Mr. Rochester. I'm attracted to Jane. And personality-wise, I think you're actually much more similar to Jane, and I'm much more similar to Rochester.
Oh, wow. Wow, that's a lot to unpack right there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well...
And, in case anyone doesn't believe me, my wedding vows came from the novel Jane Eyre. And they were a quote from Mr. Rochester. I didn't even do this intentionally. I was just looking at, like, a list of classic novels to use as, like, quotes at weddings. And I was like, I really like that one.
Yes.
I think he's captured it perfectly.
Well, it is true, though not in all ways, that Jane's backstory is more like my backstory. And Rochester's backstory is more like your backstory. That is a fact that if you knew us well would be easy
I also
to confirm.
think you're way more morally upright than me. I'm way more the one to be like, can I just lie my way out of this situation?
Okay. Well, this is gonna take some time to unpack that one. Okay. Yeah. Well, I don't even remember where I was going with that before, but I guess maybe it's time to actually get to this movie then. So, both of these films are David O. Selznick productions. He's a really famous movie producer from the first half of the 20th century. And he's one of these hard-nosed, hard-scrabble, chop-chop-chop guys. But he also considered himself an artist. And successful or not, he really cared about making artistically quality films. He did want to do it. And by the time that this film was being produced, he was really successful. And he had kind of taken over Hollywood. He was kind of the guy.
Yeah, he ran his own studio, which was, like, smaller than the normal studio. But he was still...
He invented... a technique which I don't even think people are doing anymore, and is one of the most amazing and brilliant business setups I've ever heard, which is basically, he would be the producer of a film, but he would not make the movie. So he would come up with the idea for films, he would hire all the right people, hire all the people he wanted for the film that were loyal to him.
Director, writer, actors.
Director, writer, actors. He would produce the original version of the script, produce the original storyboards, then
He doesn't have script credits on either of these films.
He would produce the script,
okay.
Although he was involved in the script. He had a highly supervisory role over everything. As one thing we have to know about this person is that at this point in his life, he was heavily using amphetamines.
Okay.
So...
He had a lot of energy.
And so he was like, I'm getting so much more done than my competitors. And competitors like, how do you do it? How do you get so much done? The answer was he would work all night, every night, high on amphetamines.
Okay.
So he did get a lot done, to be fair to Mr. Selznick.
And how old was he when he died?
I don't know. He also introduced Alfred Hitchcock to amphetamines.
Oh, I thought you were going to say America, but also amphetamines.
That is true, but that's not in this film. He would do all the fun stuff. He would do all the creative decision-making parts of the movie. And then after that was done, he would take this package that he had produced and he would sell it to a real film studio. And then they would do the boring, laborious parts of actually executing his vision, and he would maintain artistic control so he could veto any decisions that he liked. So he had gained so much power and influence in Hollywood that he could basically say, all right, I'm going to do all the fun parts and you guys can do all the boring parts, and he could get away with it and make a lot of money. So that's what he did with this movie. He got Joan Fontaine. He got the script produced.
Was Joan Fontaine like under contract to his studio, or did he hire? Okay.
As a matter of fact, Joan Fontaine and Olivia de Havilland were both on contract to the studio and were both considered for the role. And in theory, due to scheduling conflicts, he picked Joan. I'm guessing that Olivia was not happy about that. Yeah. Especially considered that she apparently had some connection to the story because she had played Charlotte Bronte, or was going to play Charlotte Bronte. So, yeah. Selznick originally brought on John Houseman, who I think we might describe as the primary screenwriter of this film. John Houseman is not a household name, but he's a really important person in the history of film. He is probably most famous as Orson Welles' original collaborator in his Federal Theater project, which is how he became so well known, was his inventive and politically progressive plays, and so they worked together to establish the Mercury Theater, and which became a big radio thing, the Campbell's Playhouse, and so they made each other famous together. And Houseman is the person that discovered Orson Welles when he was a weird kid traveling around the world saying, "Can I be in your play?" And he said, "Sure." And so then they became friends and collaborators after that. Now, by the time that this movie was made, Houseman and Welles had become bitter enemies.
Ooh, the drama.
I'm a big fan of Orson Welles. I really like his movies. I really like his acting. I like his bit. I like his
genuine artist.
Intellectual style. I'm a big fan. Libby knows that.
Yeah.
So, part of this story is about how another case where we see Orson Welles never really succeeds as a filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And even despite all of his acclaim, Orson Welles considered himself to be an extremely frustrated filmmaker. In fact, it was Orson Welles who convinced me, as a young person with certain ambitions, not to become a film director. Mm-hmm. Because Orson Welles was very clear in his later life that he really regretted his choice to become a film director. Not enough artistic control, way too much dependent on huge budgets and horrible locations.
Did he want to be like an actor or a novelist or something else?
I don't think he knew what he should have done. I think he originally wanted to be a Jean Cocteau type. He wanted to be a true Renaissance man, and he wanted to write, film, act, etc.
Well, that's not possible, so the studios weren't going to let him.
Well, if he had been willing to stick to smaller, independent, and largely European productions in the way Jean Cocteau was, Jean Cocteau did it, and I think his tastes were too rich, and he couldn't say no, and so that's a fact. And he convinced himself that this time he was really going to get it right, and he was going to trick the studios, and it was all going to play out like he wanted. And it never really happened. So yeah, kids, maybe don't be a film director. It's not as good of a job as it sounds, unless you want to work really hard and make a lot of money, if that's your goal. So
that is a lot of people's goal.
Which is a lot of people's goal, so that's great. So by this point, another part of Orson Welles' story is part of the reason he never quite reaches the success and influence that he wants is because anytime he gets anywhere, he gets in a huge fight with his close friends about how he wants all the credit for everything. So he got a bunch of huge fights with John Houseman about how he wanted all the credits for everything, and they stopped being friends. So Houseman was hired well before Orson Welles was brought into this movie. So Selznick hired Houseman, brought in Robert Stevenson, who I guess I just have to say I think was a really poor choice to direct this movie.
Yeah.
I'm going to read some of Robert Stevenson's, his 5 most famous credits. Mary Poppins. The Love Bug and its sequel, Herbie Rides Again. Old Yeller. The Shaggy DA. And his one good movie, Bread Knobs and Broomsticks. Mm-hmm. These are all like silly.
David on record as Mary Poppins not a good film?
First of all, it's Libby who's on record primarily as Mary Poppins.
I have not seen Mary Poppins.
Okay. Yeah, it's not good. It's fine. It has some of the musical numbers are nice. It's not a good movie. Come on, people. It's not a good movie. It has some nice musical numbers. Bread Knobs and Broomsticks has some okay musical numbers, but is sort of wacky and psychedelic and countercultural in some ways that make it interesting as an early film. So yeah, these are mostly like silly kids movies. And now Robert Stevenson has a long career. He directed a lot of other movies, so his brand had not. He later went on to work for Disney, so his brand had not been established at this time. But yeah, interesting choice for this movie. He was a huge fan of the book. Was a member of the Bronte Society, so I think that's what's.
Was he a huge fan of the book?
And he was a member of the Bronte Society.
I don't think he read it very closely.
Now it was Aldous Huxley who made a lot of the most controversial decisions in the script.
Okay, so it's Aldous's fault.
It's Aldous's fault, and. Aldous is a very talented writer. He wrote Brave New World, which we discussed a little bit in our last podcast. A very well-written book. He was also a deeply sexist person, and his writing often expressed that. And it was Aldous's decision, most famously, not to ever show Bertha on screen. And he said, guys, people aren't going to be scared of Bertha if you ever let them see her face. They're going to start, sympathizing with her and thinking that she's a victim. So
just because she's a woman, or...
Because she's a person and she's going through something very difficult. And he basically said, well, then they won't think it's a scary movie. So don't do that. You should only ever show Bertha from the back, from distance, talking about, and then she's just a monster lady who will get you in the night. And that'll be scary. So don't let the audience see her or they will sympathize with her. That was Aldous's key insight. And everyone was like, now the movie makes sense. She's just a monster lady.
Had Aldous read the book?
Presumably. I bet he'd read it.
Okay.
I bet he'd read it.
Okay.
In fact, I know he's read it. Yes.
Okay.
He read it.
Okay.
I've read some of the discussion back and forth, and I'll just say again that his notes are very pointed. It's not like he doesn't get the implication of the changes that he's doing. These are intentional changes to make it very palatable and very easy to digest.
Okay, so we had like the full Stevenson script approved by Selznick, because I know Selznick wanted to accurately adapt the books that he was adapting.
You're right.
So we had the Stevenson script, and then Huxley comes in and is like, actually fix this, fix this, fix this.
First of all, Selznick never approves anything. That's part of the bet. You're always waiting for final
Selznick had a vision that Stevenson was fulfilling.
Something like that. Selznick didn't really know what to do with this book. I don't think he had, unlike with Rebecca, he didn't come in with a really strong picture of how to adapt it.
Okay.
And his policy, which you were correctly citing about wanting to aggressively, accurately interpret books, was really influenced by the success of Gone with the Wind, which did really try to stick to the book. And I don't know if you heard about this, it was actually really successful, and a bunch of people went to go see it in the theaters. So this
film was presumably in production already.
That's
before
right.
That
this
came
was
out.
kind of a parallel production, and Selznick is constantly moving back and forth in this production story between these two productions. So I think this was an idea that he had, that he was testing with Gone with the Wind, and it was only after the Gone with the Wind that he really committed that as his brand. I don't think he really told Houseman or Stevenson or Huxley what to do. I think he said, write a script for it.
Sorry, when I said Stevenson earlier, I didn't mean Houseman.
I understood.
Yeah.
Well, Stevenson was also involved in writing the script. So I think Houseman and Stevenson presented a relatively conventional interpretation of Jane Eyre, and he was like, not Hollywood enough, Too many different ladies I'm supposed to have sympathy with. I can only have one. And so Al just came in and fixed that problem. After the script was finalized, then we bring in Joan Fontaine. We sell the package to Fox. And only then is Wells brought in.
Was he under contract to Fox?
No, Wells is independent.
Okay.
He doesn't work well with supervision.
Okay.
Actually, nobody wants Wells under contract.
Okay.
This is kind of the whole problem. And so, there's a lot of controversy, as there is in every Orson Welles project, about exactly how much did Orson Welles do. Both because Orson Welles was credit greedy and is constantly going around saying he did things that he didn't quite do, and because at this time, Orson Welles is already extremely famous. Yeah. He is a household name. He is maybe the most famous artistic person in America, primarily just from his work in plays and in radio, the whole War of the Worlds thing. Yeah. I'm not going to recount that. This is shortly after Citizen Kane. So Orson Welles is a household name. He's maybe the most famous artist in America. And anytime he joins any project, whispers begin that this is really an Orson Welles project. He's writing and directing and producing and everything, and everyone else is just there to follow him along. And Orson did not always reject this, although formally for this project, he was always very clear that he was just part of it. It is true that Orson Welles was deeply creatively involved in this project. His contract originally gave him an associate producer credit, and he did a lot of the work of a producer. He was very involved in the casting process, and it was his influence that really led them to cast almost entirely people who had acting experience on the British stage. He was like, this is a British movie. I want people who understand how British stories are told so they can help us adapt it to an American audience. And he also directed several scenes, including the scene where Jane and Rochester first meet. That is a fully Orson Welles product.
He had also, in 1940, directed this for radio and also played Rochester in that.
Yes, he played Rochester several times in his life, both before this and after this. And I think he considered himself the best Mr. Rochester.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure he did.
I'm sure he did.
I'm sure also every other Mr. Rochester thinks that.
I think again, to come back to it, maybe he has a broody voice, so I can see how he could, in that way, be a good Mr. Rochester. I think I'm not happy with his casting as Mr. Rochester, for the same reasons that I'm not happy with his casting, with Joan's casting as Jane Eyre. Now, I don't know if he's considered the world's most attractive person, but, for example, he's extremely baby-faced.
Yeah.
That's like his whole bit, that he's baby-faced. Mr. Rochester is supposed to be totally the opposite.
Yeah.
And
craggy.
He's craggy, and by extension, old-looking. And this is partially a story about just how plain women have romantic feelings. Old, ugly guys have romantic feelings too, which I guess is very generous of Charlotte. And
he's also 29, and he's playing a character who we don't ever get Mr. Rochester's age officially, but he's somewhere between 35 and 39. So he's about 10 years too young to be playing this, and he has a very delicate face. And he's very tall, too tall. He's not the youngest person to play Mr. Rochester. Do you know who the youngest person to play Mr. Rochester is?
Do I know? Was Mr. Hurt younger than
No.
him? I don't know.
Charlton Heston played
okay.
Mr. Rochester in a 1949 TV film, I think, when he was 26. And the woman playing Jane was 27. But Charlton Heston didn't look great.
So yeah,
smoked a lot of cigarettes.
A lot of the romantic tension of like, will they get together? They have an age gap. And some of the dark, naughty sensuality of, oh my, but they have an age gap, is lost completely in this interpretation.
And also, like, you kind of lose the fact that Rochester's kind of tired of women only being after him for his money, because he knows he's not attractive and he knows they're not actually in love with him. And so Jane, who actually, I think, does like the way he looks, is so refreshing. Yeah, and I think Joan Fontaine is 25 in this film, and I think she's a little too old to be playing Jane. Yeah,
I mean, it's a smart choice for them to, unlike a lot of productions, to have a young Jane and an old Jane. Just like the Anna Paquin, Charlotte Gainsborough version.
I think the 1934 version, which was the biggest talkie that had come before this one, I believe they did not cast a child to play young Jane. They just had the adult actor. So she's like punching out a 14-year-old boy, and we're supposed to feel bad for her. Not totally successful. Also, she was blonde. They couldn't make her not. She's blonde with these little ringlets.
Oh my. The film is scored by Bernard Herrmann, hired by Mr. Selznick. Now, Bernard Herrmann is most famous for being quote-unquote Hitchcock's composer. Yeah. So it's interesting to see that crossover there. He did not score Rebecca. He did score Psycho and Vertigo. He also scored Taxi Driver. So this is now a double feature with Taxi Driver. So this is our first composer double feature.
That was his last film.
That was his last film.
Yeah, and Herrmann also had worked with Wells at Campbell Theatre, with Campbell Theatre.
Yes.
And he did the score for the original Rebecca radio play.
That's right.
Which came out shortly after the novel came out. And that score was the Rebecca score, the Rebecca radio score was the inspiration for the Jane Eyre film score, which I think is a bad call because this score is very exciting and dramatic, and I think is too much for Rebecca.
I think this score is terrible, and I hated it.
I didn't like it, and especially since we watched Rebecca right afterwards, which does have a good score.
Yes, it does. I thought the score was ugly to listen to, did not fit the film, and set the wrong tone and mood, and was weak. Yeah. I felt like if I was an audience member going to see this in 1943, I would say, that's a cheap score. It felt and sounded cheap. There wasn't a lot of it. It didn't make the film more beautiful. So I was really disappointed in the score. Yeah. And it makes sense to me that it was taken from a different book, which is related, but very different. I think this is our first composer double feature. What do we call them? Double feature? What do we call them?
A double feature double.
Double feature double.
Yeah, you did it, Bernard Herrmann.
John Houseman, who was the original creative director of the film, had now passed through so many hands that by the time it was released, he said he was extremely dissatisfied with it and insisted that his name be removed.
Oh, wow.
Threatened legal action, and Selznick said, no, you're famous, so I'm putting your name on the movie. Selznick, thank you. Selznick said, no, your name is famous, so I'm putting you on the movie. And he didn't. He was too scared of Selznick to sue. Okay.
Also, he did actually write it, so...
He wrote a version of it.
Okay.
He didn't tell him not to show Bertha's face, I guess is what... I don't know if he objected to that part, but in defense of Mr. Houseman, he didn't write that part. The film was made on a $1.7 million budget. It's not cheap. And it was filmed from June to April of 1943 at Fox Studios.
June to April? That's impressive.
April to June.
They filmed it backwards.
Good point. Thank you. April to June of 1943 at Fox Studios.
Which, just to remind everyone, is during World War I. World War II.
You're right.
One thing that makes this adaptation different than a lot of other adaptations is it is not filmed on location at a nice British house.
Yeah.
Which, for the record, I actually liked way more than I thought I would. I liked this sort of artificial-looking Thornfield. And it also means that they could, actually show it burned down at the end.
Kind of makes it feel a bit more dreamscapey in a way. I know what you mean.
I liked the sort of gothicness of the artificiality of Thornfield. That's, on a very short list of things that I liked about this film. The set is one of them.
Do you think Thornfield is represented effectively and that it is gothic enough? Those are some of the concerns that people have had about the film. Okay, so good. One question I was going to ask you is, how do we fix Thornfield? What do we need to do to fix the way we depict Thornfield for this movie? And apparently the answer is not. That's the part that they got right. Great. As you already noted, Elizabeth Taylor is in this movie. It's her biggest role to date. She is not credited, which is kind of surprising.
Yeah,
She's a pretty big part of the movie. She's an important character.
Earlier, and she was credited in those.
Yeah.
So I don't know what's up.
What happened there, but okay.
Also, clearly they wanted to make her a big star.
Yeah.
She was like on that trajectory.
Yeah.
I don't know what's up.
Not sure. I think they just decided she didn't need to be credited. People got her. She was that girl. Okay. I can't explain it.
I immediately recognized her.
Sure. Well, she has very distinctive eyelashes, and that's the first thing every time I see Elizabeth Taylor. This was a Christmas Eve, 1943 release. Fun Christmas movie.
I don't know.
Whatever. I think they're worth Christmas movies.
I don't think I'd watch Jane Eyre at Christmas.
I think
there are no Christmas scenes.
This adaptation is more Christmas friendly than other adaptations.
Well, I hate this adaptation, so I
True.
wouldn't ruin Christmas by watching it.
Now, the film went on to gross $1.75 million. So it made $50,000 in profit. A 3% return on investment.
It deserves it.
So
this is our lowest positive.
Our lowest
so far?
positive.
Okay.
This is our break-even movie. We've never had a true break-even.
It has slipped in under The Green Knight.
It's slipped in under The Green Knight at 29%. So pretty from the industry's perspective, both movies did not make money.
Yeah.
The initial reviews were not particularly positive. A common refrain in the reviews was that Orson Welles was not taking it seriously and was trying to parody the genre. Because, of course, Orson Welles is a genius, Libby. He's the world's greatest genius.
Okay.
So it's not that Orson Welles did a bad job in a bad movie. He gets it, Libby. He's in on the joke, and he's making fun of this silly book and silly story and silly movie by being like, isn't this silly? So that's what
Did Orson have anything to say about that?
Orson said, it was a pleasure to work on this movie, and I only acted in it and didn't do anything other than acting, and don't get me in trouble. That was what he had to say.
Did he say, I actually did a really good job?
I don't think he commented on that. I don't know. Now, to your point, I do not think Orson Welles was doing it as a joke. I think he thought he was delivering Hollywood acting. He's been in some other movies, he's done radio, but now you gotta do Hollywood, so let me show up, and I'm actually really good at that too. So I'm just gonna be so Hollywood about everything. And yeah, he was real Hollywood about everything. That wasn't the problem. I don't know. I don't think he did a terrible job, frankly. I think, again, this movie is very poorly directed.
Yeah.
And though a lot of his delivery is weird and odd, I don't think it's weird and odd as in he's doing a bad job reading the lines or interpreting the character. The pacing of the dialogue in the conversations is terrible. Where Jane and Rochester are supposed to be having these kind of like witty back and forth. There's like long pauses in the middle where it sounds like someone's trying to remember their lines.
Yeah.
You need a director to come in, as Hitchcock is famous for, and saying, you say this, then 2.5 seconds later, then you say this, then you immediately say this. This was something that...
Hitchcock was just behind the camera pointing at people, cueing them when to say their lines?
Hitchcock is one of the most controlling directors.
Okay. Or did he give them times to wait?
Beforehand. He had extremely meticulous storyboards and would plan everything out exactly what they had to do. And often actors would be like, what if we interpret it differently this way? And he would say, no.
Yeah, well, I will say I don't like the directing in this film. I think the worst part about it is the script. I think they have a garbage script that they're trying to interpret. I think the character of Jane is incoherent and not relevant to the book. And I think Joan is trying to play a character who wouldn't say the lines that have been written. I think the overall story is crafting a very different Jane character. And then when there are quotes directly from the book, those are things that this character would never say. So she's having a really hard time delivering them.
So I didn't know that she said a lot of things that aren't in the book. Can you give me an example of something she says in the movie that she would never say in the book other than, oh, I'm hot enough to have dinner with that guy at the inn. I just don't want to.
Yes. At one point, Rochester says something like, you examine my countenance, Miss Eyre. Do you think me handsome? And
I've seen that in other adaptations.
Yeah, that's... Okay. Sorry, did you want something that isn't in the book?
That is not in the book.
I mean most of it.
Okay. All right, fine. I just want to make sure I'm interpreting correctly. You're saying in the script, she's required to say a lot of things that her character would never have said in the book.
No, I'm saying opposite.
Okay, try one more time.
I'm saying Many of the lines, I think it's less than a majority, many of the lines are quotations or pretty close paraphrases from the book.
That was my impression.
However, the overall structure of the screenplay is crafting a character for Jane that is very different than the character of Jane in the book. Jane in the book is a complicated feminist. This Jane is a little angel. Mm-hmm. And so she gets all these complicated feminist lines, but she's supposed to be a little angel. So I think she was just like, how am I supposed to say this and also play the character that the director wants me to play?
So the character's actions do not match the character's words.
Yeah.
Would be one way. Okay, got it. Very clear. And that matches what my understanding, having not read the book, but I think that checks out. Frankly, I think Joan Fontaine does a pretty good job here. Again, I think all of the actors do a good job. That's my opinion. And it is the director and perhaps the screenwriter, especially Mr. Huxley, who are breaking it apart. I think Joan does a good job in a difficult position of playing a character who is interpreted as, just as you're saying, is her whole thing is that she's a good girl. She's a good girl. Not like those bad girls. You wouldn't want to be a bad girl. That's not. Yeah. And she brings it humanity and, though not feminist, a real sense of bravery, nobility. Now, the modern reception to this film has been quite different. This film has a 7.5 rating on IMDb. Only 10,000 votes, so not a ton of votes, but that's a pretty good score with a pretty good number of votes. And on Rotten Tomatoes, this movie has a score of 100%.
What are you talking about?
This is a 100%.
That's a glitch.
Rotten Tomatoes rating. Now, to be fair, or I'm not sure, the fact is that all of these ratings are from 2002 to 2022. Uh-huh. So
there's probably like 3 of them.
No, there's 15.
Okay.
And they're all positive. In fact, modern reviews are very positive. Good. Yes.
I have no explanation for that. I'm completely flummoxed.
Are you saying, Libby, that the audience was right and the critics were wrong?
I mean, it has a high score on both IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes.
So the original reaction was right. Modern reaction wrong.
Yes. Okay. I mean, the original reactions arrived at the right conclusion, but if they thought the problem was the actors, then they are not correct about that.
I think that is great analysis. I think the original production said, the actors didn't take it seriously or didn't do it right, and that was not the problem. It's poor directing, poor scoring. Now, this movie did not receive any Oscar attention. Yeah. And the BAFTAs didn't exist yet. I think my initial question for you is about the opening of the movie. The opening of the movie definitely wants us to believe that we are hearing a quotation from the novel. A quotation which sort of, instead of hearing about her dreams, it begins with how she was to awaken. Is that opening bit from the novel? Are any of the textual slices we get here from the novel? They're all fake novels.
They do, sometimes just film the page of a novel
at the very beginning
and act like that's the book. That is not the book. The first line of the book is, "There was no possibility of taking a walk that day."
That's a much better first line for the book, for the story, than what they put in this. So, okay. Yeah, again, I think the opening sounds a lot like the opening to Rebecca. It's a sort of mysterious thing about her dream-like state of trying to make sense of reality. Yeah.
I will say, I have a lot of problems with this film. I think the first scene, the Gateshead sequence, is actually pretty good. I don't have a problem with that. It's, they cut a lot, but they don't have a lot of time. I think this is an appropriate Gateshead sequence.
That's really interesting. Would you care to guess who directed the Gateshead sequence?
Did Orson Welles jump in and do that?
Those are the two scenes that Orson Welles did. The opening sequence and the Mr. Rochester Horse sequence.
You did it, Orson. You saved the beginning.
I've heard people reference this. I mean, I think the conflict with... Is the boy's name John?
Yes, her cousin is John Reed.
Is that also his father's name? Do we know?
There's a lot of Johns. I think that might also be his father's name. Actually, I think that's his uncle's name. So there's 3 brothers. Oh. I think the uncle in Madeira, John Eyre, I think his name is John.
But so in these sort of first 2 sections, the early life of Jane Eyre.
So the novel, people do often break it up into the houses where it is set in.
Yes.
So there's the Gateshead section, the Lowood section, the Thornfield section, the Marsh End / Morehouse section, and the Ferndene section.
Got it. Thank you. So the Gateshead and Lowood section are cartoony, caricatures, boring, especially this moment that we see in every adaptation where Mr. Brocklehurst has to cut off Helen's hair, and especially the line that he says, I've heard a lot of people rage against this line, where he says, Mrs. Scatcherd, how often must I tell you... Sorry?
Scatcherd.
Scatcherd, thank you. Mrs. Scatcherd, how often must I... So he says, why is there this pretty girl with curly hair? Curly hair is sexy. Sexy is bad. And then Mrs. Scatcherd tells him, well, her hair is naturally curly. That's just what hair does sometimes. And then he says, how often must I tell you we are not here to conform to nature? And...
Are these quotations up from the film, or did you get this from the book?
I believe that's from both. I believe that's from both.
Okay, yeah, I think it's slightly different in the...
Oh, maybe that's true. I think that's from the film. I think what I read
is from the film. Okay.
So that may be true. And people feel like, this is a stupid thing. This is just stupid. That doesn't make any sense.
Okay. So,
please.
I've seen a lot of adaptations of Jane Eyre. And I, this morning, went back and double-checked to make sure that this is never included. There's a really small element of the book that has not been included in any adaptation, but that I think is fucking gold. It would take 3 seconds to incorporate. You have to cast one more person, and you have to make one more costume, and the bang for your buck is totally worth it. So, immediately after we must cut all of these curls because they're the sign of the devil sequence. Immediately after he says that, I think after he has cut off the curls.
And he cuts off Jane's hair at the same time in the book too?
No, so it's actually not Helen. Yeah. It's a different girl.
Oh,
it's a different girl.
Helen?
No.
In all the adaptations, it's Helen.
Yeah, because they don't want to have to develop another character.
I see.
Also, we want to give Helen angelic.
Of course,
Curls. But so immediately after he goes on this diatribe about curls, his daughters and wife enter. They've come to look at the pores.
Okay.
His daughters have curly hair. And his wife is wearing fake curls.
Oh.
Possibly implying that he is cutting off girls' hair to make hair pieces for his wife.
Whoa.
Yeah.
That is not in any of the movies.
I know. And I'm just like, you don't even have to include the daughters, whatever. But you gotta include this wife with her fake curls. She's gotta come in. And that firmly establishes that Mr. Brocklehurst is a hypocrite and a sadist. Yes. Like, I think in a lot of, not all of them, but in a lot of adaptations, you can walk away thinking that Mr. Brocklehurst is a true believer.
Gives you that impression in this movie.
That he is just super Christian, and he's like, we have to mortify their flesh to save their souls.
That's what he sells.
But no, that's not what he thinks. He just hates poor children. And he wants them to be as miserable as possible.
Well, he wants their hair, apparently.
He's
just on the lookout for good hair.
This is a hair farm for his wife's fashion. And also, he does just want to make kids miserable as possible. If he wanted higher quality hair, he would feed the girls more.
There's not enough food bits in the movie, but that sounds pretty believable.
Oh.
Fits the stereotype.
Yeah, there's definitely not enough food. That's a huge part of it.
Now, of course, shortly after this, cute little Elizabeth Taylor does die of unnamed disease, pneumonia, presumably.
Does she cough in this one? So what she has in the book is tuberculosis.
Oh.
And there is a typhus breakout at the school that kills most of the girls, but Helen doesn't die of typhus. She dies of tuberculosis.
And they need to be even more personal for Charlotte Bronte.
Yeah.
Got it. And of course, in the film, it's very much depicted as what I guess would guess be pneumonia. Maybe they say a name because she gets it from walking around too much in the rain as punishment. Which I don't think that's in the book at all. It's not in any of the other movies where she walks.
Yeah,
around in the
so
rain.
there is in this one the walking around in the rain is a specific punishment. I don't remember what she did that was bad, but she and Jane have to go walk around in the rain carrying irons.
It's for the fighting back in the haircutting scene.
Okay.
Helen is wearing a scene that says vanity, a sign that says vanity, and Jane's wearing a sign that says rebellion.
Okay. Given that they only have 90 minutes, I think that's an effective condensation of the idea that, like, this was this school was just generally unhealthy.
Yeah.
Like, there wasn't one specific issue, but these girls were being underfed. One thing that relates to a 19th century concept of medicine that we now know isn't true, but that Charlotte Bronte was including, was that low wood means it's situated low in the ground.
Bad air.
There's bad air. It's sort of foggy and damp.
That's bad.
Although, I mean, being damp all the time is bad for you. It does make you
If you don't have any type of climate control in your house, that could be a problem. Could lead to a lot of mold. That's not good for you.
So, like, they're not getting enough food. The water they have to wash themselves with in the morning is frequently frozen, and they have to like punch through the ice. They have to.
I think there's a line about that in the movie.
Okay.
I think there's a throwaway, but yeah.
They walk to church every week, like 3 miles uphill both way through the snow. There's a bunch of stuff. The school is making them sick. And if you don't have enough time to establish all of that, then you can do that.
They put those pieces together, I think, pretty well for the audience.
That's an acceptable change.
I mentioned already that I found myself really enjoying Dr. Rivers and his speeches to Jane, but I guess we've already covered that that's not exactly a plot point of the novel.
Yeah.
She get these, they kind of remind me of the beginning in a way of the 20th century novel by E.M. Forster. Morris. A different type of early novel teacher instruction, but kind of weirdly similar in a touching and inspiring, if not entirely well-placed way.
Yeah. So Dr. Rivers is not a character, as I mentioned. So now we're going to probably get into it. So the first character that we meet that sort of gets pulled into Dr. Rivers is I think he's a doctor, but I think he generally gets called Mr. Lloyd. The sequence at Gateshead is more prolonged in the book. And one of the things that happens that I think is actually pretty important thematically, and so I think you have to include it, is Jane, because she keeps fighting with her cousin, gets locked in the Red Room, which is the room where her uncle died. And so she's afraid of ghosts. She thinks his ghost is going to come walk around. I don't think she thinks the ghost is going to attack her, because she knows
They kind of implied that in the Ruth Wilson miniseries. She's like afraid for her life to go in the Red Room.
So yeah, she is terrified, and she's so terrified that she like faints. She collapses. And at this point, Mrs. Reed is like, I guess I do technically have to call a doctor if the child has collapsed.
I see.
So she calls in Mr. Lloyd. He's talking to her, and I think like the servants are also in the room. And he is kind of getting the picture of what's actually going on here. So he asks the servants to leave, and he's like, Jane, do you want to go to school? Do you maybe not want to live here anymore? And she's like, I would love to not live here anymore. So it's Mr. Lloyd who talks to Mrs. Reed and says, maybe you should send this girl to school. It seems like you don't like her.
Okay.
Now, he doesn't suggest Lowood.
Right.
He imagines she'd be going
Somewhere
to a nicer school. Yeah. Dr. Lloyd, Mr. Lloyd, is only in that scene. But he's the first, genuinely nice
fill that role.
Person to read. Now, to Jane. Now, in this film, the first genuinely nice person to Jane is Bessie.
Right.
So this is the first strike against feminism that Aldous Huxley has committed.
Okay.
So Bessie in the book is actually a fairly complex character. And in this one, they've turned her into, she's nice. Everyone is mean to Jane because she's poor, except Bessie, who is like, aw, sweetie, I'll try to help you.
Are there any complicated characters in this movie? Just to check in there? Right.
Certainly no women. I mean, I think Rochester might count as complicated.
I guess.
Okay.
I don't think Rochester is a character in this movie, but that's for the second part.
Certainly no women are complicated. So in the book, Bessie certainly does lots of mean things to Jane. She helps her go in the Red Room, and when Jane
is part of the system. Yeah,
when Jane is struggling to get out of the Red Room, she threatens to take off her garters and tie Jane's hands up. So certainly no fun there. But Bessie is still the nicest of the people at Gateshead. When Jane has calmed down later, I think she says, look, Jane, you're such a nice girl. You could be such a nice girl. You just keep being so passionate and yelling about your feelings all the time. If you just stop doing that, everyone would like you. I like you, but you just keep causing all of these problems. Because you react when people shove you in rooms.
You have feelings.
Or when they throw books at your head.
And you have your own thoughts about things.
Then we get to Lowood. The purpose of the Lowood sequence is actually really subtle that I think most people who are just watching a film aren't going to get. And even reading I didn't get this the first couple times I read the book. At Lowood, you've got Helen, who's a little angel. And also very willing to accept abuse.
She's the perfect 19th century woman.
Yeah.
She's virtuous and she doesn't complain when people abuse her.
Yeah.
Those are the two traits you need.
So she tells Jane, maybe just let people abuse you. It might make you a better person.
People will like it.
She gets,
rulered.
Switched on the back of the neck at one point. And Jane is like, I would not, if that had happened to me, I would have turned around and broken the switch in half. And Helen's like, The teacher did that to me because I was sloppy, and I am sloppy, and maybe I'll stop being sloppy after she's hit me. And Jane's like, wow, this is extremely unrelatable to me. So there's Helen, but then there's also another teacher, Miss Temple. Miss Temple is the superintendent of the school. I guess she's like the principal. She's the head teacher. Mr. Brocklehurst is the superintendent. She is unconditionally loving, and this is really helpful to Jane at her point in life.
And she's kind of a character in this movie. We do get our one nice teacher.
So there is a teacher. I think it's.
I'm thinking of the Anna Paquin one.
Like Miss Temple, unconditionally loving. At one point, after Jane and Helen have been abused, she invites them to her salon and gives them some cake. In the long term. During the entire tenure that Jane is at Lowood, she says, I turned into a nice girl because I wanted Miss Temple to like me. Like, Miss Temple was so unconditionally loving, and I wanted to be deserving of that love. And Bessie told me that the way to be loved is to just be a quiet, nice girl. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll do that. The reason she decides to leave to be a teacher is because Miss Temple gets married. Mm-hmm. So Jane does work as
You mean to be a governess, not a teacher?
Yes. So Jane does work as a teacher at Lowood for 2 years.
Oh.
Then Miss Temple gets married. And she's like, well, no point in staying here anymore. Also, I hate this because my soul has been so thoroughly squashed. And the only thing that made that worth it is now gone. I absolutely have to do something else. So Helen is sort of directly telling Jane, squash your soul. I don't think Helen is exactly a good person.
Mm-hmm. She's not fully mature.
Another thing that got cut. So in this movie, Mr. Brocklehurst is sort of in charge all the way through. In the book, Mr. Brocklehurst is like the managing director, but there's also like a board of subscribers or something. So there's local gentry who are donating money to support the school. Yeah. But most of them aren't really paying attention to it. They just let Mr. Brocklehurst manage it. Yeah. Then there's a typhus outbreak, and they're like, oh, did half the girls just die? Yeah. Okay, we maybe need to pay closer attention. So Mr. Brock, I don't think he gets fired, but his powers get distinctly curtailed. Yeah. And so after Helen's death and after the typhus outbreak, conditions do improve at Lowood.
That's very interesting, because the film makes a key point that Jane refuses to be at Lowood with Brocklehurst, partially because she would hate it, but it's kind of implied because, like, she was not going to be part of this evil system. Yeah. In a way, it's kind of the most feminist thing about Joan Fontay's Jane Eyre, is that she's like, I know that would be easier for me, but I'm not going to abuse these children just because it's easy for me. That is her one moral standpoint that's not just about interpersonal relationships.
Yeah, but I think Huxley includes that because he couldn't portray a woman as having her soul squashed by not being able to express her emotions.
Well, I think the film's version is effective for the film story, but this does, at least in part, answer my question, which is, what is the subtlety in the first part? And I think that we've clarified that, so that's good. Yeah, do you think for this first section, for the Lowood and Gateshead sections, or for the movie as a whole, any other parts, do you think we can make the movie better by interpreting it in some way as 1940s social commentary? How about the fact that Blanche is blonde in this movie, unlike our brunette Jane Eyre?
I'm not totally sure what Jane Eyre's hair color, what Joan Fontaine's hair color is.
It's a lot more brown than Blanche's hair.
Yeah, it's a lot more black. I mean, Blanche's hair is platinum. No adult has hair that color.
Blanche has, as you point out, platinum blonde hair, clearly dyed, when Joan has natural-ish brown hair. And of course, in the book, Blanche, because she's a bad lady, she has kind of dark skin and dark hair.
No. I don't think it's because she's a bad lady.
Oh.
I think it's Please. I've read this book so many times that I'm actually mostly living in the subtext.
Okay.
So, not all of them, but a lot of adaptations like to make Blanche blonde. I want to shout out Cary Fukunaga for not doing this.
Everyone's insistent. I mean, could it be more 40s social commentary in a way than that? Not very insightful social commentary, but yes.
I think there are a couple other people who have done a brunette Blanche, and you guys do get points. Blonde is the traditional sort of glamorous, beautiful color, and so we want to have the maximum contrast between Jane and Blanche, and so we give her blonde hair. The way Blanche is described physically And Charlotte Bronte never makes a direct connection here, so you have to put it together yourself. But her physical features seem very similar to Bertha's.
Yeah, I agree.
She's taller. She's got dark hair. She doesn't have a particularly pale complexion. She's got sort of bolder features.
She sounds like she looks kind of
brows.
Spanish a little bit.
Yeah. And Jane has, I think, sort of like a sort of nondescript, mousy brown hair. Right. So I think Rochester picked Blanche as the woman that he was going to flirt with to make Jane express herself because she would be the least tempting to him. I think he's like, this is the woman.
You are in the subtext. You're all the way in there now.
I've swum down to the bottom.
Okay.
I'm scraping through the sand down there.
I see that now.
Yeah. So she actually sounds a lot like Bertha because Rochester is like, who am I not gonna actually accidentally fall in love with? Blanche Ingram.
Now let's just talk about that aspect because in this movie, we are not particularly given the impression that he is flirting with Blanche to make Jane jealous. That is something that kind of happens, but first of all, Rochester doesn't seem to aggressively, as he does in the book, in this film, Wells's Rochester does not aggressively invite Blanche's flirting, which Rochester really certainly plays along with it in the book. And in all of the adaptations, it's generally implied that Rochester is positive or indifferent about Blanche's flirting, and he just doesn't really care, some other lady flirting with me. But secretly inside, he's just deeply in love with Jane, and he hasn't fully processed that yet.
I don't think that's what other adaptations are doing, but okay.
That's what I saw. I'm thinking specifically of the William Hurt, Panna Paquin one and this one.
It's been a very long time since I saw that one, so I can't comment on it.
Yeah, it's implied that he's neutral or receptive to this flirtation, and it's just sort of something that's going on. But you believe, is it explicitly said in the text of the book that he's only playing along to make Jane jealous, or is that also subtext?
So a lot of people say, make Jane jealous. I don't think that's the right phrasing.
Okay.
I'm not totally sure how much of this is explicit in the text and how much of this is just really heavily implied in the text. Mm-hmm. So what's your exact question here?
My question is, in the text, is Rochester playing along with the flirtations as some sort of ruse to manipulate Jane? With Blanche's flirtations?
Yes, he is.
Okay, so it's stated one way or another that he was never interested in Ingram. It was in Blanche. It was all a bit.
It was all a bit. Here's what's going on from Rochester's perspective, which you can piece together from like what he says later and what Jane explains and what we know about his whole situation. So this comes after the bed burning scene. Can I actually take a diversion?
Wait, it comes after so Blanche doesn't show up until after the bed burning. Is that true in the film? Do you remember?
It's gotta be.
Okay.
If you learn one thing from this podcast, this is what I want you to learn. In the book, Jane puts the fire out 100% by herself. I have looked, just this morning.
That's also not in any adaptation.
I went through every major adaptation of the last 50 years, and in every single one, Jane starts putting it out, but then Rochester wakes up and starts
does all the hard
and
stuff.
rips. In some adaptations, they're both doing it equally. In some adaptations, Jane like cowers in the corner while Rochester did it. That's what Orson Welles does.
Yeah.
I don't know if Orson or the director or Aldous was like, well, we can't just have this man lying on this bed doing nothing while a woman is the action hero. We got to give him some action.
In fact, I can quote...
Let Jane save her beloved. Let her be the hero. That is the book. Apparently, we need to keep making adaptations of this book because y'all haven't got it yet.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right. And it follows a standard Hollywood rule of the era, which is ladies don't like weak men. So there can't be any scenario where there's the male romantic lead and he in any way freezes, panics.
He's just asleep the whole time.
Stays asleep. The male hero must always take action and save himself. And it was considered, leave it up to your interpretation, not a feminist issue at all. And it was just because it's not hot to ladies. Ladies want men of action.
Well, I think it is a feminist issue if we have to constantly make men hot to women.
Meaning that's the only purpose of men is to be hot to women, and that's not feminist?
Yes. That women only care about the hotness of men. More often shows up in the reverse, but they are both anti-feminist. So let Jane save her beloved. This is what I want.
That's very interesting because...
So I do say that the 2006 version is my favorite version because I think it has the best...
They totally don't do that part right. I know you love that version.
The best characterizations of the lead characters in general. But if there is a production out there that I'm not aware of that does have Jane putting out the fire entirely by herself, that one's my favorite. I don't care how bad the rest of it is.
Interesting.
So, like, the overall arc of Jane Eyre is the story of Rochester being constantly in peril and Jane saving him every time. He falls off his horse, can't get up. Jane helps, like, him walk back over to his horse. Rochester is asleep when his bed's on fire. Jane puts out the fire, saving him. His house guest has been bitten and he needs to keep it a secret while he goes and gets the doctor. Jane's gonna keep it a secret. If Jane had been there when Bertha burned down the whole house, everything would have been fine. Rochester wouldn't have gone blind. Bertha would have been saved. Jane would have made everything work out. And then at the end, Rochester is blind. He can't see. He needs someone to walk him around and fully take care of him.
Yeah, well, I do think you're right that in no adaptation of Jane Eyre, and I've seen quite a few that you've listed, is really this sense brought to the screen at all. Even in the book, which I know does the whole point of their meeting scene with the horse is that Jane helps Rochester, and Rochester's like, a girl helping me, but I'm the man.
He's not confused. He's so into this. Oh my God! Please rescue me! I need so much help.
I see. Okay, that's interesting. Because in every adaptation, even in that horse scene, it seems like the directors go out of their way to be like, yeah, she's helping him like a little bit, but he's still like totally fine. He doesn't really need her help. So. It is interesting how systematically we seem to be ignoring that element.
Yeah. And I think some of that might be based on like people just copying this first good one. I'm not counting the 1934 one, which makes a lot of changes, a lot more changes. But so this is the first like major production. And honestly, it feels like every script writer since 1943 reads almost all of the book except for this scene where they just watched Orson Welles put this fire out. And I'm like, y'all, that is not what happens in the book. Another thing that's different between the book and the movie is Jane's reaction to Adele. So in the movie, she thinks Adele is great. Also, Margaret O'Brien is killing it. She's adorable. I don't think other characters are reacting to her appropriately, but I do really like her performance as Adele. I think she's very fun. In this movie, Jane is so maternal and motherly. She's such a caring woman. Book Jane is not particularly impressed with Adele. She basically says, look, Adele is stupid, and she's never gonna be smart. I had a really easy job taking care of her. She was nice to me, which frankly, at this point in my life, I guess I'll take. But like, guys, Adele is dumb. I'm not particularly impressed with her. She's really obsessed with like presents and pretty dresses. And I just accepted that I was never going to get her to be interested in more important things. And at the end, in the epilogue, they're like, and we found Adele a school that was suited to her abilities, where everyone would be really, like, gentle and kind and would not ask too much of her.
Wow. Well, I do have to say, this is interesting, and I haven't read the book, which helps, again, this makes more sense, because I am the world's #1 Adele fan. Mm-hmm. I love the character of Adele so much.
In all adaptations?
And I was worried as I started this adaptation. I was like, okay, this is going to be the one where I don't like Adele. Oh boy. But nope. Continued to absolutely love Adele. I love spending time with Adele. I love her character. I think she's really entertaining in every adaptation. And, in every movie, every TV show, they pretty much do the same Adele, which I love. And I love Adele because she's entertaining and she's fun and cute. But also because I really admire Adele. Now, it sounds like I'm admiring movie Adele, not book Adele, perhaps. Mm-hmm. But I have to say that when I am in a difficult time in my life, mm-hmm. Adele is my inspiration.
Okay.
Adele is the person that I'm like, David, if you are like Adele, you can be a success no matter what's happening to you in your life.
Do I need to get you more ballet slippers?
Does she specifically ask for ballet slippers in the movie?
I don't think she specifically asked for something, but Rochester brings her a dress and ballet slippers.
Oh, there are slippers. Okay, I didn't quite remember the slippers. So, no. I don't think Adele likes slippers. I just think they're going to fall apart if I wear them. I don't think I'm the right fit for those. Adele is obviously very positive in the films. She is aggressively optimistic and bubbly. That's not always my personality. I'm a lot more brooding. Frankly, I'm the brooding type. And so that's one thing that I admire about Adele, her ability to find positivity in any situation. Adele is also noble and principled. And
in what way?
Well, for example, she insists on thanking Mr. Rochester for the dress. When he gives her the dress, he's not paying attention, and he just sort of walks around and leaves. But she stands up straight, turns to him, and gives a little speech. I think she says it in French, so you will help me to translate it. But she says, "Thank you, Mr. Rochester, for this beautiful gift," blah, blah, blah. So she is like, this is an important thing. I'm going to have this shared moment with Rochester, and she wants to be polite. She wants to really establish a good relationship. So Adele is also in her own really tough situation. Yes, she gets to live in a nice house. She's living with people that don't seem to have a lot of affection for her, and
I don't think she's aware that they don't have a lot of affection for her.
I think she is aware.
I don't think she's picking up on that from Jane.
In the movies, Jane likes Adele, so I'm only commenting on movie Adele. In the movie, before Jane arrives, I should say, she's living with people that don't have a lot of affection for her, and she refuses to let that get her down. And she's had a difficult home life and personal journey of her own. She has something that, a lot of characters would choose to be really ashamed about and would really affect them, and she refuses to care. And so this is what I admire about Adele. I feel like in a lot of these stories, you have all these characters that are great at finding reasons to be sad and to feel bad about themselves and to be, I'm a victim and my life is hard and woe is me, and that's what I'm going to define myself as. And Adele refuses to do that. Adele's like, yeah, I have problems. I have things going on in my life, but that's not what defines me. Actually, I'm warm and kind and bubbly and intelligent and noble, and I love fun. That's what defines me.
I don't think Adele is that kind. She's like, hey, give me my goddamn presents.
In the movie, she's very kind. Okay. She's not demanding presents. In
a lot of adaptations, she is demanding presents because in the text, she is demanding presents.
I believe that the text is different.
I mean, I think the criticism the book has of Adele is that her ambitions are just so low. Like, she is easily contented.
She's like 7.
I think she's more like 9.
Okay.
The book also portrays this as an element of one's nature.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's not because she's a child; it's because of who she is. And you can
That's not fair.
And you can disagree with that.
I do.
Adele is very easily contented, and this is actually kind of a problem for Jane because Jane doesn't have any challenge in her life.
You mean Adele doesn't have any challenge in her life, so Jane and Adele cannot relate to each other? I don't follow. No.
Adele does not pose any challenge for Jane. Adele doesn't Adele doesn't want to learn. I think you're misinterpreting challenge.
Apparently,
Adele doesn't want to learn German. Like maybe if Adele really wanted to learn German, then Jane would have to go learn German, and she'd have to exert herself in some way. Like Jane is just sort of teaching her arithmetic and reading, which is easy and not very interesting to Jane.
Oh no, a kid that's easy to babysit. I hate that. I hate when kids are easy to babysit.
If the only person you could interact with was a kid who was easy to babysit, you'd get bored.
I don't think that's true. I mean, okay, fine. We can make a fun game together or something. I don't know. So, I believe that I see something that's partially shown in the film, but maybe not primarily, which is that she's vain and she's vapid. Mm-hmm. And those I think are fair criticisms, I guess, of a person. I don't know. They're not criticisms I tend to care about a lot, whatever.
I think Adele is another female character who gets made completely uncomplicated. Mm-hmm. So in this one, she's a cute little angel. In the book, she is a cute little angel, but is that really what we want? What I really,
admire about Adele, that I don't have the same admiration for other cute little angel characters, say Helen, who's, a true angel, is that Adele is not an angel. And a lot of the adaptation, she's sort of mischievous. Mm-hmm. She's a bit rebellious, a bit of a rapscallion. Identities that sometimes, characteristics I can sometimes identify in myself. And so Adele is both positive and subversive. And she is, she wants and succeeds to be easy to get along with, but also she stands up for herself and expresses her own independent views. These are a balance that I struggle to hit.
So we took an Adele tangent. Was there a question you asked earlier about something?
Sort of, yeah. Another question about that sequence that I want to make sure I understand, that I've seen interpreted in different ways in different adaptations. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I get the impression that, I believe in the Charlotte Gainsborough version, Jane is basically not romantically interested in Rochester until after she sees Adele and Rochester flirting.
Try that one more time.
After she sees Blanche and Rochester, some person with an E at the end of their name, flirting with Rochester. And it's kind of like you were saying, although not exactly like you were saying, shall we say that that she's being made jealous about this. And also just that I think it's more just like she realizes, well, Blanche isn't a good girl. She's vain. I'm a good girl. Shouldn't Rochester be with a good girl? What's the what's the timeline of their romantic relationship with that in mind?
So I think any like film as opposed to TV miniseries is really suffering from like shortening the timeline. So like you might only have 1 or 2 scenes between Jane and Rochester before Blanche shows up. And so there's not really enough time for her to start expressing her love for him. I think my opinion as someone who's all the way down in the subtext, I can't even see the surface anymore. I think Jane and Rochester fall in love immediately, and they are completely in love the whole time.
That's what the book seems to want us to think.
And she kind of plays this down in her retelling.
Yeah,
but
I see.
One of the things that's so great about Jane Eyre is that Jane and Rochester are so good at flirting. And I just want to read their quippy lines back to each other. An interesting comparison to Rebecca, Maxim and Mrs. De Winter are so bad at flirting.
Yeah.
And it's honestly also great to watch.
It's cute.
Really good flirting or really bad flirting. I'm happy to watch either one. Also, Mr. Rochester goes to get Blanche and the whole party after the bed burning scene. So that's where we were picking up. The bed burning scene is actually like quite intimate. So she rescues him and like, you know.
That's not really shown on screen in any adaptation.
They see each other in their night clothes. That's
of course.
That's a bit of something.
Sort of a Pride and Prejudice adaptation moment.
Truly,
there.
When does anyone see each other in their night
Not
clothes?
in their night clothes, but in their wet clothes is the famous part of the Pride and Prejudice adaptation.
Oh.
I know that's not in the book.
Okay.
I am aware of that.
Okay. Yeah, so a little bit of intimacy there. Also, like, Jane gets to be active and be a hero, and Rochester gets to be saved.
Not in the movies.
And they're each really into that.
I see.
They love this dynamic.
Got it. Yeah, of course in the book, in the films, often we don't have any time for any subtleties of like, actually this is kind of romantic. It's just like, in the beginning, he's scary and mean. And then later on, they decide to be friends. In fact, in this version, Wells is really mean to her.
Yeah, their very first interaction at post-horse scene is he snaps at her and tells her to, like, refill his leg water. And just, like, kneel down to do this, and it's very subservient. And I'm like, truly, what is this?
Yeah, they were like, don't worry. At first, he's really mean to her, so it'll be a surprise. He says, he asks her to play some piano for him, and then he plays one, and he says, you play perhaps rather better than some, but not well.
That's actually straight from the book.
I believe that part.
He does insult her piano.
And then later on, when he's trying to flirt with her, he opens by saying, you have no talents, your disposition is dark and rebellious, your appearance insignificant. That's the prelude to their romantic relationship. Obviously, the first point, specifically not true. She plays piano at least okay, and you know that she's very good at sketching. So that's just false. That's just mean.
Yeah, I think the dynamic that's going on there is that Jane has been really squashed by her time at Lowood, and she starts interacting with Rochester like a squashed person. But I think he can maybe tell that there's actually more to this person than that.
I think you're right. I think the film is acting like he's sort of trying to draw her out, and this is a bit of a feint.
Yeah.
That's what the film wants us to believe. He's still really mean.
So you know, that is in their first evening conversation. That's pretty much what it's like. In the second evening conversation is when he says, "Do you think me handsome?" And she says, "No." And then she's like, "Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have said that." And he's like, "Yes." So he got her to, you know, that's obviously not the polite answer.
I see.
The polite answer. She says the polite answer would be to say something about like looks aren't important.
Right.
But she is becoming more comfortable around him, and she's like, maybe I don't have to be squashed. So he's like, I'm being mean to you, but also please be mean to me right back. Let's be honest with each other. Except for one thing, which is that I am married. We're not going to be honest about that.
We'll get there.
Yeah.
I guess the last question I have about the Blanche to close that off is one thing I really liked about this version was how it portrayed Blanche. Now it does make her a platinum blonde, which it looks good on film. It's a reference that people know about. Why not let people go with what they have? But I thought that she's not on the movie a lot, but I thought that she was kind of pleasant and interesting to be around. And of course, the traditional depiction of Blanche is that she's just horrible and gross, and she happens to be attractive, but nothing else about her is good, which, kind of makes it a little bit hard to imagine why people would find her very charismatic unless they are so vapid. And, in a lot of the adaptations, which I believe is also true in the book, we go out of the way to present Blanche as, bad. She and her mom talk bad about poor people and governesses. And
it's not especially poor people, but it is governesses. So one thing is that
in the William Hurt, Anna Paquin, Charlotte Gainsborough, Zeffirelli adaptation, first Blanche is like, I hate poor people, and then her mom is like, yes, for example, governesses. Okay. So it sounds like adaptations they really do go out of the way to make her seem bad.
So one thing that's going on is briefly mentioned in the book and generally doesn't get incorporated is that the Ingrams actually aren't doing super well financially.
Yeah, they need it.
So, Blanche really does need to marry Mr. Rochester. Yeah. She's distancing herself from poor people.
That's a good answer. That explains some of the tension I'm seeing.
And she also says, I had so many governesses and they were all awful. I had so many governesses.
I see.
Is what you're supposed to be getting from that.
That's a good answer. That's a good explanation some of the tension I'm seeing here. Again, I liked this version of Blanche. I like that she's a person and she's attractive and maybe he likes her, maybe he doesn't or whatever.
Yeah, I think
she needs his money and people need money. And
I think Blanche was successful because book Blanche isn't very complicated. She's basically just a bad girl. And so Aldous Huxley was like, aha, we can just import her.
I thought the movie didn't even make her a bad girl. She's a little bit trying to get money, but she's poor and she needs the money and she's being nice to him. They don't establish
that she's poor.
That's true.
But
she wants to marry a rich guy and she's willing to be nice to him. There are worse crimes for a 19th century person to do. Mm-hmm. So I really liked how they portrayed her. I felt, I don't know if it's fairly the right term because I can't comment on the book, but positively than anyone else did.
A lot of adaptations do like to incorporate a scene just between Blanche and Rochester, which is not in the book. Jane's in every scene. Mm-hmm. In this one, the scene between Blanche and Rochester is at some point he says, she flatters him, and he's like, Blanche, everybody knows, you and I both know that you are just trying to get me for my money.
Right.
I'm not blaming you for that. Can we just be honest about that? And she's like, what? Never.
He's pretty rude. In this movie, he's pretty rude about it. Mm-hmm. And he's clearly making fun of her. Mm-hmm. Kind of implied because he's decided he likes Jane better, just trying to get rid of her.
Mm-hmm. Well, no. He brought Blanche over to get Jane to express herself.
But in this movie, that's not what happened. Blanche more or less invited herself to his house, and he's sort of trying to, get her out of his hair.
I don't think that would happen. I think he went to go get her.
Okay.
So what happens is, structure of the story-wise, there's the fire scene. They have an intimate moment. And Rochester's like, I think Jane is in love with me. I think this is plausible that my affections are, in fact, returned.
I see.
But here's the problem. He can't just ask her to marry him. Two reasons. One, because she might say, no, you're a gross creep. Right. And he doesn't really want to experience that. And he doesn't want to...
Apparently, he's decided she's in love with him, so that shouldn't be the problem.
He's not 100% confident. Okay. He has a suspicion.
All right.
He's like, okay, time to investigate this suspicion. So, one, she might say, no, you're a gross creep, leave me alone. And, that's an uncomfortable experience for her. She might leave. Right. He doesn't want that. Mm-hmm. Two... She might say yes. She'll actually probably say yes, regardless of whether or not she is in love with him. So this would be a huge social step up for her. The obvious answer is yes. And Rochester doesn't want her to marry him without being in love with him. One, because of his own, personal situation. He's got a bad history of women who just want to be with him for his money. I think he would genuinely like to be loved. He wants to be married to someone who actually loves him. But the main point is that they're breaking the law. He's already married. If he wasn't already married, he could just say, do you want to marry me? Even if she doesn't love me, that's okay. I'll get to be with someone that I love and I'm improving her life. We'll make it work out. Rochester needs to know that Jane is actually in love with him for spiritual reasons, to save his soul. Ooh, I got a big reaction from that. So One of the reasons that people who don't like Jane Eyre is just like, Rochester's just being really mean.
I've heard that.
Why is he spending all this time making Jane jealous, but pretending to be about to marry Blanche? What's going on there is he needs to get her to express her own love for him. And if he just directly asks her, then she'll just say yes, regardless of whether or not it's true. And the reason I know this is because after the proposal scene, well, first off, during the proposal scene, as soon as she clearly states her affections, he immediately flips. He's being pretty mean and saying like, well, I'm going to marry Blanche. You're going to have to go to Ireland. It's very far away. Because then, after they have established that they are going to marry each other, Jane's like, and then Rochester said something kind of weird. He clutched me to his chest and said to the heavens, again and again he said, "Are you happy, Jane?" And again I answered yes. After which he murmured, so this part's just kind of weird if you don't know the rest of the story yet, "It will atone, it will atone. Have I not found her friendless and cold and comfortless? Will I not guard and cherish and solace her? Is there not love in my heart and constancy in my resolves? It will expiate at God's tribunal. I know my Maker sanctions what I do. For the world's judgment, I wash my hands thereof. For man's opinion, I defy it." Do you have thoughts on that? Or do you want me to explain what's going on?
No, I think the message is clear. Of course, now we're getting into something that's shared.
Yeah. Okay. Just to clarify for anyone who didn't pick up on it. So he's saying,
I mean, we haven't actually revealed what the twist of the book is. Maybe you want to explain what the twist of the book is.
Well, I think we've referred to it enough times.
Okay.
So he's married to another woman who is insane and he's hiding in his attic. He's like, the issue is, if I commit bigamy, then I am going to hell. And also, if Jane and I aren't legally married, then she's going to go to hell for having sex outside of marriage. But he's like, if I am taking this sad person who has been treated unfairly her whole life, and I am genuinely making her happy because she is actually in love with me, then this is a genuinely good act, and God will forgive us for it. So he can only marry her and have like spiritual safety for the both of them if she's actually in love with him. So he needs to be 100% sure that she actually is.
I guess this goes, I think you've given your answer more or less, but I'll ask the question, I guess, a little bit differently then. So, should we from this and other things conclude, then, that Charlotte Bronte did not intend Rochester to maybe be the bad guy? Because, of course, there's been a lot of discussion in the later interpretations about how maybe he's really the bad guy.
If you personally dislike Rochester, whatever, I can't argue against that. I think you have no grounds to stand on if you think Charlotte Bronte wants you to think of Rochester as the bad guy.
I've seen a lot of YouTube videos that said the opposite, maybe, or,
Just because lots of people are saying it doesn't mean it's right. Also, I think...
I'm not saying you're wrong. I just want you to know. Yeah. Just be prepared.
I know, David.
I'm sure you do.
I know.
I want the audience to understand the weight of this statement. The child acting in this movie is superb.
It is very good.
Adele, Jane, Helen, the other girls in the school, everyone is killing it.
I also really like John Reed, the cousin. In the sequence where Jane and Brocklehurst are having the conversation about, hell is a pit of fire, and should you want to go there? No, what must you do to avoid it? I must keep in very good health. One of the greatest lines of all time.
That's one of the greatest lines of all time. It is so good.
I don't remember exactly what exchange, but somewhere in there's a cut to the little boy who's stuffing his face, and he's like, am I going to hell?
Every time I watch the movie, I'm like, all right, let's watch Jane Eyre. She's a sad girl and she has a hard time. And then we come to that line and I'm like, I fucking love Jane Eyre.
Yeah.
Jane Eyre is the coolest person of all time. So that is truly one of the greatest lines ever written. It really, really is. Well, I think we should, I guess, just briefly cover what I feel like is the worst part of the movie.
I hated it so much.
Let's talk about it. There's a scene where while Jane is on her way to Thornfield, after she's left, and she's left the school, and she's like, I got nothing. I found this random job posting. It might not even work out. She is feeling really desperate. And so then she goes to this inn, and maybe with her last coin, shall we say, tries to get some food. And when she walks in, she is noticed by a gentleman.
Bounder.
Sorry?
A bounder.
A bounder, thank you. Yes, I couldn't think of the polite enough term. A bounder who sees her, walks in, and she looks like Joan does in real life, which is as a very famously attractive person. And so he's like, hey, Jane... or tells the waiter, why don't you invite that lady to come have a glass of Madeira with me? And obviously it's a come on. And Jane hears about this, and she is aghast because she's such a good girl.
And he winks at her, and this is mortifying.
And she would never, ever do anything like that, have drinks in a bar with a strange man who winks at her and says, oh, I never have wine.
Yeah. First of all,
like really,
who are these 19th century people who don't drink alcohol?
Yeah,
that's not true.
You should have died by now from poison. That honestly, that doesn't make
cholera.
Cholera. Yes, that's what I should have said. From toxins, pathogens. So yeah, I'm amazed that you're alive. Then that is truly amazing. So yeah, totally don't believe that statement. Also, let's just really make clear. So maybe the fan theory is right, and Jane has secretly been truly hot this whole time. Maybe so. In the book, she definitely doesn't think that she is hot. That, as you pointed out, with her sketches and everything else, that is the point of the book. And though, it's nice to be attractive. That doesn't hurt you in your life. And congratulations to all the incredibly attractive people in the world. Part of the book is very explicitly about what about the unattractive people? They have feelings too. Unattractive people have rights too, and we should care about them. Mm-hmm. So normally in the book, there's a lady and she has a hard time, but then she's super hot and she does what all ladies should do, which is sexually submit to a man, and that solves her problem. And so the moral of the story is clear. And so then this film is saying, well, why is Jane Eyre better than the other ladies? Because she would never do sexy stuff, and she doesn't care that she's hot, and she just thinks that's gross. So it's not that Jane doesn't have that option. Mm-hmm. The point of the book, again, to put it very cynically in my own style, is that Jane's not hot. She can't just play the I'm hot card, which everyone wouldn't want to do, but whether she wants to do it or not, that's just not an option to her. And she never even considers that as an option. It is not a moral rejection of flirtation as a way to get ahead. It is just the practical realization that she's kind of sad about it. She seems like she kind of wishes she was hot and she could just go into a bar and flirt with a nice guy and he would buy her dinner and then she has something to eat. That sounds like a nice story for Jane.
I do think that book Jane Eyre, if a man winks at her, she might go talk to him.
She might be like, great.
She might say, excuse me, what is wrong with you?
Sure. Just look in your eyes.
How rude.
Sure.
Or she might say, what's up?
Yeah, she might be into it, she might not, but she'd take it as something of a compliment, You go to a bar and someone wants to have a drink with you, that's a compliment in general, seems pretty fair, and she might be like, yeah, maybe he's nice, maybe I can live with him or something. She doesn't have any real problem with that. So the fact that this movie makes clear that, first of all, she is super hot, and she could do that, and she's rejecting it because it's bad, and she's a good girl, not a naughty girl, completely undermines the feminist message, pushes it explicitly into this Madonna whore thing, and makes the character less interesting and more boring. I absolutely hated this scene.
It was really bad. I agree.
It was terrible.
If we did reverse dubbies, this would win for worst scene.
We do a Dabazies, then
Adazies.
Adazies. Thank you. Adazies, but I'm not doing the Dazies.
I think Drazzies actually makes it sound terrible. No one wants a Drazzy.
I don't have any way to connect it other than as a summary. I guess that's a good summary of the first half of why this movie was bad.
Yeah.
That sums up the first half. So
I think it's interesting that in order to make this explicitly anti-feminist point, not only did we want to make that point, did Aldous Huxley want to make that point, he also completely had to undermine the whole concept of the story in order to do it. What are we doing here?
To I guess, try to defend Aldous Huxley, I think Mr. Selznick, of course, he's the executive, it's all decision. And I think in this case, we should point to Mr. Selznick. Mr. Selznick is the one that, I'm not totally sure, but probably had Joan Fontaine or the star, Vivian Leigh, in mind for Jane from the beginning. And so, if anything, I would guess that Selznick told Aldous, by the way, this one part where it says that Jane's not hot, we're going to make her super hot. Okay. So we need to fix that. Make sure you mention that she's super hot.
One thing that I didn't... So I'm pretty sure that Joan is in wigs the whole time. Okay. One of her wigs is actually very stupid. Oh. It's her sleeping wig where she's got the two long braids.
I don't even remember that.
Well, it's all the nighttime scenes. So she sometimes has two long braids. but they don't. I'm pretty sure they just like clipped braids into her normal wig. So it still has this sort of like chin sweep, which doesn't make any, if your hair was in a braid, gravity would pull it out of that. What? So, also, putting your hair in braids is what's going to give you the curl at your chin.
Yeah, they do seem to be
I thought she looked like a Valkyrie in those shots. It was very weird.
They do seem to be really trying to make her look old-timey. I guess they're just trying to say to a Fordian's audience, look, it's hairstyles from 100 years ago. Yeah. Comment on, like and post the ones that you like on Instagram along those lines.
I thought the costumes were perfectly acceptable.
Seems solid.
Yeah, the costumes are fine. I think they're a little bit too late. They're reading more like 1848 to like 53. The book was published in 1847, and the majority of the story is taking place 10 to 11 years earlier.
Let's maybe put the real spotlight on the Bertha situation for a second.
Okay.
And let's jump straight to the meaty and tricky part of this.
Okay.
Of course, as you can probably tell, this is a subject that Livy and I have discussed before. So this is not the first time we've discussed this subject. So to sum it up, the question is, what should Rochester have done? Did Rochester do right by Bertha? Of course, let's just be real clear. I would say the majority of the readership in the last 10 years has commented of Rochester being bad, treating Bertha incorrectly, turning her into this mad woman in the attic, et cetera, et cetera. I will say, personally, I have some sympathy to this, and I'll just take my own sentence, which is, I'm not sure if it's Charlotte Bronte or Rochester or who I should be talking to here, but I really feel like somebody was given a lot of bad legal advice. Because this scenario that Rochester finds himself in is not such a fanciful scenario like it never happened. This type of thing actually happened quite a bit in the 19th century. And yeah, there was a lot of scandal, there was a lot of drama at it, but as a matter of fact, this type of thing wasn't considered that big of a deal. It happened kind of all the time. And people got divorces, they got annulments, and they moved on with their life just fine. So the idea that Rochester was somehow legally or socially trapped, I don't really buy that. Also, I understand that he's keeping in her house a lot of really unpleasant places for mentally unwell people to be in the 18th century. He seems to have 19th century, thank you. He seems to have a lot of money. And if he wanted to live somewhere else where Bertha wasn't and put her in her own seaside beautiful cottage with all the best people, he seems like he could afford that just fine. So to me, his actions seem not good to Bertha because he's shutting her up in a room and making her a prisoner, even though she has troubles. And also not good for him. Why would you keep this person that you're trying to keep a secret in your house where you have to constantly hide them from everybody and cause yourself a lot of trouble?
Well, in fact, it does make sense that Rochester wouldn't really know about what the legal situation is.
Okay, well that makes sense.
Because he is the younger son. The reason he got married to Bertha is because his, primogenitor, everything was supposed to go to his older brother. And Papa Rochester didn't want to have one son living a shabby lifestyle, so you have to marry him to an heiress.
Sure.
And then when Rochester returned from Jamaica, his father and brother died in quick succession. So I don't know if he had the contact info for their lawyer.
Well, I bet they did, but to your point, unlike maybe his father and brother, he did not have a working relationship with a legal representative. And that actually makes a lot of sense, and it kind of shows through the movie and the story. And that was a poor choice on his part. If you're going to be that rich and have a lot of family problems, you should get a lawyer. That's my advice.
He didn't plan on this happening.
It checks out.
Other thing is, Rochester does have a second house.
Yeah.
And it's called Ferndale. It's where we end.
That's right.
Not in this one, but that's where we end the book. I don't think Jane explicitly asked, but I think he brings up, you may wonder, why didn't I send her to my other house?
Yeah, good question.
Ferndale, like Lowood, has a low situation. It is an unhealthy house. Right. So he's like, I could have sent her there, and she would have gotten sick and died.
So you and Jane are going to move there?
And then she wouldn't have been my problem anymore. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to kill her. He explicitly says, I didn't want to be responsible for her death. So I did not send her to this other house. I just kept all the women that I've saved in my nice, healthy house.
Okay.
So the reason he moves to Ferndean is that Thornfield burns down.
Okay.
He can't live in Thornfield anymore. So he goes and lives in Ferndean. Jane meets him, and Jane's got 20,000 pounds, or she's down to 5,000 pounds.
Okay.
I don't think they're living in Ferndean for the rest of their lives.
Sure.
After the end.
It seems like Mr. Rochester had the resources to solve this problem. I think you could afford another place for Bertha to live. I don't think the answer is, I just couldn't afford to keep her anywhere other than the attic.
Well, I mean, he doesn't live in that house.
That's true. That's an interesting point. And this is something which I didn't get from any other adaptation. I don't think in the Charlotte Gainsborough adaptation, it's really made clear that he doesn't live there. And that is a good point.
He's been living in Europe because he doesn't want to be in a house with Bertha.
I don't even think that's there in the Ruth Wilson version. Maybe I've forgotten.
I think it is.
Okay, so that's actually a good point, that he doesn't live there. So for him, he is keeping her out of the way. All right. Well, I'll shrink my criticism down to, I think Charlotte should have talked to a lawyer first, because I think he would have surprised her. Of course, when he reveals the situation to Jane, he does it in the most difficult way possible. He says, "Jane, what you see may shock and frighten and confuse you. I beg you not to seek an explanation. Don't try to understand. Whatever the appearance, you must trust me." Really leaning into the...
Sorry, when does he say that?
When he's about to take her in and see, I believe...
To see Bertha?
Bertha/Mason, I'm not exactly sure at which point.
Oh, sorry, that's when Mason's been bitten, and he's like, don't ask for explanations of why this man is bleeding out in my attic.
Which, that's not the most charismatic way to express that idea, but it does, I guess, add what I would call some cheap gothic thrill.
He's also busy. He's got a lot on his mind.
And I think this is one of the things that...
Also, that's not in the book.
Makes me, I feel like, and I could be wrong, but from what I'm getting from the reaction, like Jane Eyre and Rebecca Moore. One thing that I really like about these movies, or these stories, is looking at these male characters, how complicated their situation is once you know the whole story. Partially just like they're more emotionally complex. Now we see why he's hesitant and all the other things. But also, to some extent, I really like how it explains for both Rochester and Maxim their inability to sometimes communicate well and their lack of focus. They seem kind of all over the place. And at first you're just like, these guys are idiots. And then you realize, you know what? They have a lot going on. They're actually
this is a very realistic portrayal.
Yes, I feel like it's extremely realistic when you look at it. They are distracted.
Yeah.
They are stressed, and they are hiding something, and they are really worried about it, and they are busy. Both of them, we later find, are not just like, oh, there's something bad in their path, they don't want to talk about it. They are actively working multiple hours every day to hide this secret.
Yeah.
And they act like somebody who's doing that. So that's something that I people want to make them just as these so deeply emotionally driven person. But I think their stories make sense if they're kind of emotional people, but just mainly really busy and stressed people, which is very realistic to me. So after the house burns down, we get to our escape sequence, as it's sometimes referred to.
One thing that makes me sad is they really condensed the stay scene when Rochester begs Jane to stay.
Oh yeah, they do kind of say.
One thing that I did like, one thing that was interesting that they did draw attention to in this one is as Jane's running up the stairs and he grabs her hand to stop her, he says, when I think he says 19.
Yes.
Or maybe, when I was 19, I got stuck in a bad marriage and it's ruined the rest of my life. So let me do that to you, Jane.
Yeah.
Let me just be in a bad relationship with me, please.
Yeah.
And he's just totally oblivious to what he's asking her to do. I did like that, and that's not in the book. So we're now at 3 points of good things in favor of this movie. I like the sets, I like Adele, and I like that he's totally oblivious to the fact that he's like, just let me ruin your life.
That was that was an insightful writing. Yeah. I agree with you. And for once, we're actually kind of fair to Jane. Slightly feminist look on that moment. Is that the scene where we get the knee fog, which is one of the wilder
no,
effects?
I think that's in the Poor Obscure Plain and Little scene.
Of course, in the scene that Orson Welles directed, where Rochester and...
Yeah, you had a really strong reaction to that horse accident.
I have a very immersive experience when I was watching the movie. I happen to think that scene is very well directed and was very effective. And I was very upset at Jane. Of course, this movie is sexist, so that's what it made me feel. Because she's hiding behind this rock, and she sort of hears that someone is approaching, and she's like, my solution to this is to suddenly jump out behind the rock So they really try to make a big deal about how it wasn't Mr. Rochester's fault. He was writing good, and Jane was being unsafe. But yeah, it's unlike most. In that scene, there's total fog, and it's really effective. First of all, it looks like real fog. We've lived in Europe, and that not far from that area of the world where there was a lot of fog, and sometimes it did look like that.
For the record, I have been, now admittedly in North America, where I spent most of my life, I have been in situations where there is really dense fog that's knee-high. This is not.
I have never experienced that one.
I was on like a soccer field, showed up early for soccer practice. So there's like a big low-lying area. It's not just dew.
It becomes dew, pre-dew.
A lot of fog, you can only really start to see it once it starts to get like 10 feet away. This one, you started seeing it when it was like 1 foot away. It just about felt like you were walking through the fog. So that is a realistic thing.
All right. Well, I don't think it's particularly common at that time at 7 p.m. in that area of the world, but sure. I like the one where they had full fog. I thought it was much more effective. The fog machine fog looked pretty silly and looked soundstagey.
Do you know how they did that? Did they just almost run Joan Fontaine over with a horse?
No. Okay. Joan Fontaine and the horse are never paired against each other.
Did they use rear projection? Is that a stunt double?
No, it's just two separate shots. There's one shot of the horse riding at us and another shot of Joan turning out from behind the thing. And we see then the horse run up straight on the camera. But I don't think we ever see Joan near.
I think there's a shot of Joan in the foreground and the horse in the background, and it's rearing up. I have the film right here. I mean, I think you looked away at that point, so I think you just.
Believable.
It was too scary.
I was like, Jane, you're gonna kill this horse. I'm gonna be mad at you for killing the horse.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
She's in there, and the horse almost
falls
on top of her.
That's not a camera trick either.
Okay.
They just pulled her back at the last second. Yeah. I bet you someone grabbed her close.
Was that a double or?
Yeah, that's a double.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they did almost run a stunt double over with a horse.
That's a great effect. So, but after they decide they're not going to be together for now, then she has her escape.
Yes, they decide.
Well, she decides.
Yes.
After she rejects him, I should say more clearly. After she rejects him, she has her escape sequence. And of course, as we mentioned already, in the Wasikowska, thank you. This Wasikowska adaptation, that is really the focus. And the whole movie is built around this escape sequence. It's it's not, I think, in this movie at all. We just see her leave Thornfield and then show up at the other house. They cover it
it's one of those paragraphs in the book where she says, I wandered around the moors for a bit and I knew hunger and cold, and then I decided to go back to the one person who was ever nice to me, Bessie. I think that's a fine condensing point. Like, I think you could get some really arresting shots of Jane wandering alone in the moors. Jane also gets really, like, spiritual. There's a lot of, and I shall lie upon the breast of earth, my mother, who will shelter me.
That doesn't seem to work.
We get some of that.
Not for very long.
I mean, it sort of gives her a spiritual comfort.
All right.
Then she's like, I have no food.
Yeah, talk to Mother Earth about that.
I should have taken a mushroom foraging class. Number one class, if they didn't include a Lowood, that would have been really helpful to me.
It's a good point. In this film, she's like, all right, not going to live at Thornfield. I guess I'll go back to Gateshead. That's where my aunt lives.
She wanders around in poverty, off-screen for a little bit. Really. And then she's like, I'll go back to Mrs.
Do you think this actually makes more sense? Is that like a reasonable thing for her to do? Because in the book, she just kind of runs off into the wilderness without a plan, really. Yeah. And then she eventually decides to go back.
No. They did a similar thing in the Zeffirelli film. So in both of those films, she goes to Mrs. Reed's after the failed wedding.
Yes.
In the book and in longer adaptations, that happens earlier. So she leaves the party that Blanche is at. She's like, I can't watch Mr. Rochester and Blanche anymore. Yeah. And also, she gets a note. Actually, Bessie, it's actually Bessie's husband, shows up and says, your cousin is dead, your aunt is dying, and she has asked to see you. And so Jane asks to leave.
I see.
For like...
Oh, she's just like, I gotta go.
Yeah, she says like, my aunt is dying. A dying woman has requested to see me. I need to take a vacation.
Interesting. But that's not when she finds out that she's rich. She doesn't find out she's rich until after?
So she goes to her... The reason her aunt wanted to see her...
Of course, let's just be real clear. In this movie, she doesn't find out she gets rich because she never gets rich and she's financially dependent on Rochester. Yeah. Did we mention that this movie does not do a good job of adapting this book?
So what is supposed to happen is When she goes to Mrs. Reed pre-wedding, the reason Mrs. Reed wanted to see her is that she has a confession to make, which is that Jane's uncle on her father, so Mrs. Reed is related, so all these aunts and uncles. Mrs. Reed is the wife of the brother of Jane's mother. So Mrs. Reed is related on her mother's side. On Jane's father's side, she has 2 uncles, one of whom we haven't heard of, and the other of whom is a wine merchant based in Madeira. And she says she said years ago, your uncle came and asked to see you, and he's childless, and he wanted to adopt you and take you with him to Madeira. I hated him. I hated you so much that I said, Jane Eyre died at a typhus outbreak in Lowood. And so Mrs. Reed wanted Jane to come back to confess that she has done this. So Jane knows that she has an uncle in Madeira. This may also clear up a little bit of mechanics about stuff that happens later. She writes to her uncle. She writes to say she's getting married. She says, because, when she gets back from Mrs. Reed, it's a matter of a week or 2 before the proposal.
Sure.
So she writes to her uncle and says, I'm not dead. I'm getting married. What's up with you? You want to reconnect? Her uncle is at that point too sick to leave Madeira, so he isn't able to come. But he runs into a man leaving from England to Jamaica named Richard Mason. And he's like, hey, so this is a
crazy coincidence novel you're telling me?
This is a crazy coincidence
novel. I didn't know this was a crazy coincidence novel.
So Jane actually spelled her own doom. If she hadn't written to her uncle, this wouldn't have happened.
Yes.
So
how is this not in the movie? This is so cinematic.
Because her uncle would give her money, and we can't let that happen.
Oh, that's right.
David, did you forget? Did you forget for a moment that no feminism?
Yes, I did forget for a moment. I apologize.
I can't ever forget that. I can only remember that.
That'd be so good in the movie.
Uncle Eyre says to Richard Mason, "Hey, my niece."
His name is Uncle Eyre.
His last name is Eyre.
Okay. Oh, Uncle Eyre. Duh. Yeah, got it. Not H-E-I-R.
No.
That would be.
He says, "Hey, you've come from England.
Yeah.
My niece, as it turns out, is marrying a Mr. Rochester of Thornfield Hall." And he's like, "I know a Mr. Rochester." So it's not just you might watch this film and wonder, how does Mr. Mason know that they're getting married?
Logical.
You did have to publish bands, blah blah blah.
All right, yeah, sure.
So it's not impossible that he would have figured it out, but yeah, that's what's going on.
So just to be clear, in this movie, does Mrs. Reed say that she blocked the contact? One question I had at the end of this movie, and I always get it confused, is if the uncle can't find her, then how does she get the money? And I didn't feel like the movie explained that.
She writes, so she writes this letter saying, I'm getting married.
I guess that would allow a woman to take agency, and she can't take any agency to solve her own problems. I'm figuring it out. Okay. I'm following. Okay.
We then get a later interaction with the uncle when Jane is staying with the Riverses, which gets totally cut.
Here, I think I'm talking about the Charlotte Gainsborough version. In the Charlotte Gainsborough version, they're like, your uncle found you and he has a lot of money. And it's like, wait, if he can find her, how did he find her? The answer is she wrote him a letter. Yeah. They cut that from all the movies. Okay. So
then what happens later in the book is she's staying with the Riverses under an assumed name. She calls herself Jane Elliott. And one of the things that happens early in her interactions with the Rivers is they get disappointed that they got a letter from their uncle's lawyer saying their uncle has died and has left his vast fortune to a different relation. So they were all expecting to get an inheritance, and they get told that they're not going to do that. So Diana and Mary have to go back to being a governess. But then this lawyer is trying to find the actual heir, Jane Eyre. Pun intended?
I guess. Is that what the book is about? I guess so.
He writes to St. John Rivers. I think he doesn't know that Jane is staying with him. I see. But I think he's like, you're a local clergyman. Mm-hmm. Can you help me find this person? And he's like, I actually think I can. Yeah. So St. John says, hey, you just inherited a vast amount of money from your uncle. Sorry that he's dead. And she's like, great. Hey, didn't you and your sisters mention an uncle who recently died and who left all of his money to a different relationship? Are we cousins? And St. John's like, I guess I have to tell you, yeah, we're cousins.
Wow. So St. John really is really bad in the book.
Favorite St. John line, God made you for labor, not for love.
Wow.
St. John is like, let me make it clear. I think you're very ugly. I am not in love with you. Marry me anyway and be my effectively servant in India while I convert the Hindustanis.
Not a very effective seducer, this St. John guy.
Yeah, I think
he know what he's doing.
I think he's like, well, God is on my side.
Okay, good luck with that.
It is the morally correct choice to marry me.
Cool.
Jane, you have to. Okay. So I think that would have made things a little bit too complicated.
Got it.
Story. Like,
of course.
Jane would have to be rejecting a man of God. I'm not sure how Aldous Huxley would have incorporated that. Jane, has nowhere to go, so she goes to her aunt's, which I think is honestly really degrading, and I hate that for her, and I don't think it would actually happen. So Jane, when she leaves, says, Aunt Reed, I hate you. I will never come back, and if anyone asks how you treated me, I will tell them that you were an evil person. I hate you so much. So in the book, Jane gets to choose to come back. Mm-hmm. Mrs. Reed has to ask. Mm-hmm. And Jane is like, okay, I will overlook your mistreatment of me and come back anyway, magnanimously. And Mrs. Reed kind of resents this.
Yeah.
In this version, Jane is totally desperate and has to go to her aunt because she has nothing else to do. Jane in the book would have starved to death on the moors before going to Aunt Reed. Yeah. That's what she's trying to do.
Yeah.
And then even worse, once her aunt is dead and her aunt, didn't have any money to leave her because her son spent it all. Jane's like, I guess I'll go back to Mr. Brocklehurst, officially worst human in the world as presented by this film.
Yeah.
And it's like, how sad a situation for our heroine. And then she's like, wait, there is a person who does love me very sincerely, who, if nothing else, could maybe set me up with another governess job. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I could go back to him.
And then she's just elated that he still loves her and he can save her and solve all the problems for her.
Yeah. Hate that for everyone. And we do get to see Dr. Rivers again at the very end. He shows up. So here's what actually happens. He somehow got a letter which he says a man has been looking for you. Jane thinks oh, this is Rochester. I don't want to talk to him, too much emotion. And so Dr. Rivers burns the letter. What I was 100% certain was going on there was this was a letter from her uncle. And Jane, as is saying Jane, where are you?
Yeah.
let me leave you all my money. And I was like, oh no, the devastation of Jane mistakenly thinking this is Rochester because she doesn't know she has an uncle. And he burns the letter anyway.
Yeah.
And then I was like, well, then there's got to be some other way that Jane figures out that she's actually going to inherit all this money. But then none of that happened.
We've been very rough on this movie. I just want to say one more time, I think all of the actors actually did a good job. Mm-hmm. In particular, Joan Fontaine, she's put in some tough situation. Both of these movies are products of their time. They're not in color, even though they could be. Do you think this movie would be better in color, by the way? Or you think it was the right
I really
choice?
like the gothic elements.
It seemed to fit.
One thing that was, I'm not totally sure if it's good, but interesting, is that they try to get shadow on Orson Welles' face. So Jane is constantly illuminated.
They really push that.
And he's constantly being positioned so that he is at least partially in darkness. Until the very end when he's blind. Oedipus-like things are flipped. Yes. And then the sun is fully on his face.
That's right. We talked a little bit about the scene where Jane gets insulted by Blanche and her mother talking about governesses. And in that scene, Joan Fontaine is asked to do a lot. It really reminds me of a silent movie sequence and cinematography. And I feel like both of these movies are... one thing that's true about them is that these are both directors that began in the silent era.
Yeah.
And I think you can really see that overall being a really positive influence. When they're making fun of governance and stuff, Joan has to do a lot of different facial expressions to represent her exact feelings about every part of that scene. And it's really effective. And it's nice to see her face acting us really hard while we hear the dialogue coming in from the background. So even though that scene works because of the mix of sound and image, the director and the actor's skill working in a silent-like environment really is to that advantage. And I think we're going to see the same thing in Rebecca.
Well, there is one actor who I think does a bad job, and maybe he was just being poorly directed. But even if you hate women and you're like, well, I don't care about any of the anti-feminist stuff in this movie, whatever. Women should just be nice ladies who take care of men. Even if there is someone out there listening to this script is still incompetent because of how much it downplays the climax. The climax is so boring.
Yeah.
The climax of the book and any adaptation is, I declare the existence of an impediment. That says to be so tense and so like intriguing and exciting, but in a bad way.
Classic movie. A lot of more wedding interruption scenes are probably directly inspired by this founds that moment. I think we can miss that. This is the first I interrupt the wedding with an impediment scene, probably in all of literature.
Yeah.
This is it.
So it's very exciting. Also, in the book, and one thing that I think just like for the tone of the overall story, you have to include, even if you're tight on time, is when Jane and Rochester are walking to the church, she talks about how he's walking really fast and he's like yanking her up the hill.
He's smart.
And he's like, we gotta go and get out of the country before people realize what I've done. And at one point he turns around and he's like, Jane, I'm so sorry. I'm walking too fast. Roll with me on this one now. It's meant to be really tense and exciting, and it's so boring.
Yeah.
It falls so flat in this. There's no interesting music. The actor doesn't sound interested. The reactions from Joan and Orson and the priest are not exciting enough. I hated it.
Even when the guy shows up and interrupts the wedding, Orson Welles is like, yeah, whatever. People always mess up my plans. I give up. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty boring.
So I think that's all we have about the actual film of Jane Eyre. So a little follow-up from the studio perspective. After this film, Joan Fontaine was offered another role by David O. Selznick. They got into a big fight about this because she was tired of playing, quote, the sad sack. And so she got suspended for 8 months by Selznick. And I think labeling Jane Eyre as the sad sack is a real sign of the problem of this film. Because book Jane Eyre is not a sad sack. And I think Joan Fontaine would have liked to play the actual character of Jane Eyre as opposed to the person who was written in this screenplay.
That's, I think, a question that I'm curious about your opinion of. Does Joan Fontaine play the same character in both of these movies? Is this just, in the film, just the same character copy-pasted?
No, I think Jane Eyre in this one is a lot more confident. I think she's just too nice. That's the problem. So
you're saying the difference between, even in the film, the character of Jane Eyre and the protagonist of Rebecca is that the character of Jane Eyre is confident when the protagonist of Rebecca is not.
Yeah. So the characters in the books are very different. The character in the film of Rebecca is actually pretty similar to the character in the book of Rebecca. And Jane Eyre is different, but they didn't, in the screenplay, move her closer to Mrs. De Winter. So let's talk about who made Rebecca. Number one, David O. Selznick, still his production company. But also director Alfred Hitchcock. It was written by Robert E. Sherwood and Joan Harrison, based on the book by Daphne du Maurier. And it stars Joan Fontaine as Mrs. De Winter, Laurence Olivier as Maxim De Winter, George Sanders in the only role he ever would have been cast as in this film, Jack Favell, Judith Anderson as Mrs. Danvers, Reginald Denny as Frank Crawley, and Florence Bates as Mrs. Van Hopper, who has already been thoroughly discussed on this podcast. And we're actually rewinding in time in terms of the production. So the book was written later, but the film was made earlier.
Exactly right. And that does make it tricky to discuss this as a series, because so much of why Jane Eyre was made, and was made the way it was made, was because of the success of the film Rebecca. So we do have alternate timelines that do influence each other in both directions. So, of course, Rebecca is an adaptation of the novel by Daphne du Maurier, and it's very hard to analyze this story without understanding Daphne du Maurier's life. So I think we're going to have to review it a little bit, including the gossipy parts, because they are very relevant, and I think the conclusion is going to tell us that Daphne du Maurier was the inspiration for both of the important women in the novel Rebecca. So Daphne du Maurier is from a really famous family. She is from the du Maurier family, which is a family of famous British entertainers. Her grandfather founded Punch magazine. Both of her parents were very successful actors. her father, in particular, is one of the most influential actors of all time, Gerald du Maurier. And was Gerald du Maurier who really brought up... Thank you. Gerald du Maurier, who really brought on the school of naturalistic acting in the English world, which we've discussed a lot in this podcast. So it is Gerald who has founded this artistic movement, which now, for 100 years, has dominated performance. And he was extremely successful, extremely influential. He was also famously unfaithful and not devoted to his spouse. And this had a big effect on their family life at home and led to a somewhat strained relationship. She was very close to her father, and her younger sisters were very close to her mother. And though relations were amiable, somewhat like the Fontaine household, there was a line drawn down the middle. We've already talked about how, from a young age, Daphne du Maurier felt very unhappy about her feminine identity and strongly wished that she had been a boy. She created an alter ego named Eric Avon, who was a fearless cricketer who attended rugby school, and for a long time she adopted that as her identity. That once she reached pubescence, that was no longer possible for her. She, like Jane Eyre, was from the young age a very strong-willed and open-mouthed person. There's a famous incident where, when she was going to school, a religious educator, a curate, came to visit her at school and was trying to warn her about the evils of sin and how she must repent. And, he said that if you repented from your sins, then you did not need to fear death. So she grabbed a metal chair, picked it up, and ran at him screaming. And he cowered into a corner in fear. She dropped the chair and laughed at him and said, "I guess we're all not so unafraid of death." That story makes me laugh, of course. Having just thought about the greatest line of all time, potentially from Jane Eyre, there's obviously a connection there. While at school, she developed a deep romantic attraction to one of her teachers, and this was the beginning of her life as a bisexual person. She also, as a teenager, began a relationship with her cousin, Geoffrey du Maurier, who was also a successful actor. Their relationship began when Geoffrey was 26 and married, and she was 15 years old. Geoffrey was the aggressor in this relationship. This relationship continued for a long time, and du Maurier, I think, regretted her behavior later on. She also had a very close personal relationship with a governess, lady's maid, Maud Waddell, affectionately known as Todd, and it was Todd who encouraged Daphne to be a writer, and she felt like she had real literary talent, and she was a mentor, and they had an extremely close relationship. Du Maurier wrote and published her first novel in 1931, entitled The Loving Spirit, which is a quotation from a Emily Bronte poem, Self-Interrogation. And it was a novel about a family who knew about sailing and their intergenerational dramas and sensual romances. And the novel was somewhat successful, and it was exceptionally successful for du Maurier's personal life, because the novel was read by one Major Tommy Boy Browning, boy being his nickname, and who was maybe Britain's most eligible bachelor. He was a very successful soldier, this was, of course, between the first two world wars, and was also a famous athlete and sailor. He was in the Navy. He loved sailing. And he read this book written by a lady who sure loved sailing. Du Maurier was also a very passionate sailor and a very talented sailor. And partially due to the struggles that she was having in her own family life, her favorite memories are when her family would be vacationing in Cornwall, and her family would leave and let her stay alone at the house. And she could do whatever she wanted. And no one could tell her that it was too dangerous to go out sailing alone, which is what she really loved to do most in her life. So, Mr. Tommy Browning read this and heard about this dashing lady who loves sailing, and he sailed all halfway across the world, and just to meet her, maybe have dinner. And they did have dinner, and they got along pretty well, and they were married shortly afterwards. In 1934, when her father died, she published a very candid biography about him, including his personal indiscretions, that a few months after he died.
Was her mother still alive?
Yes. I don't know all the details. My understanding is that her mom was not that upset about this.
Okay.
And, yeah. I've already mentioned that she and her family were living in Cornwall. They lived there part of the year, as many English people did at this time, moving around, partially to deal with different climates. Mm-hmm. And she and her husband later became tenants of Minnabilly. Minnabilly, thank you. Which was one of the grandest houses of the region and in England.
It's not that great.
Okay, of the region. One of the grandest houses of the region. And obviously served
I think you're confusing it with a different hall
Milton Hall?
Yeah, with Milton Hall.
Well, both...
I've seen Minnabilly. It's not that big.
You've seen Minnabilly?
Not in person. Photographs.
Okay. All right, got it. Understood.
Yeah. It also had been, uninhabited for decades, I believe. It was a 16th century construction.
Gotcha. So that's a little bit of background about Daphne du Maurier. Livy, I know you know a lot more about the book than I do.
Well, one important personal note that you forgot is that in addition to her father being all the things you said he was also extremely homophobic, which is true. Weird for an actor who was friends with Noel Coward.
Yeah.
So that probably informed some of Daphne's approaches to things.
For what it's worth, Daphne du Maurier took a relatively homophobic personal and public, I should say, relatively homophobic public stance herself. It's a fact. But yeah, anything else about the book itself and its reception? I know it was
you've actually come to the right place, David.
Sure.
I have some insider gossip on the production of Rebecca. So you, dear listeners, might possibly have heard of my great-grandparents' names. They do have their own Wikipedia page. My great-grandparents were Bruce and Beatrice Gould. They were the co-editors of the Ladies' Home Journal from the 1930s to the 1960s, when it was good. And Rebecca was initially published in the UK by Gallant's. When it came to the US, they were looking for a US publisher. They went to the Ladies' Home Journal, which was publishing novels serially. And whoever received it, read it, thought it was garbage, rejected it, and it eventually got published by Doubleday, which I think may have introduced Daphne du Maurier to Ellen Doubleday, the wife of the head of that publishing company, who she at least had romantic interest in and possibly had an affair with. When my great-grandparents found out that their employee had rejected the greatest novel of the 20th century, he got extremely fired. So that's the inside scoop on the American publication of Rebecca.
Yes, it is a fact, I guess, as you have potentially mentioned there. Another fact about du Maurier's life is that she and her husband were not faithful to each other.
Yeah.
And that wasn't much of a secret between them. And it didn't cause the most strained relationship, but it was a real fact that it definitely had an influence on their relationship.
Yeah, it seemed like things were going kind of well, and then World War II happened, and her husband had to go to the continent. And this happened shortly after the birth of one of their children, so she was kind of left alone to single parent. And when they came back, it was hard to rekindle the spark.
Well, I'm sure that's a fact, but my understanding is that the issues were earlier than that. And I think it's interesting.
Yeah, there were issues earlier, and then they were going through a sunny period, and then Hitler invaded Poland.
That did happen. Yeah, so Rebecca was initially written, the initial draft of Rebecca was written in Egypt at a boring hotel while she was there with her husband trying to recover from a difficult patch in their marriage. They were in Alexandria in 1937. And then she left Egypt and returned to England to finish writing the novel. It's also worth noting that du Maurier considered herself, and was considered by the people, a very shy person. You know, we've made a deal about her bravado in various cases, but she was shy, reserved.
She liked being alone.
She liked being alone.
She built a cottage on the grounds of their house, and she would go, that was her writing shed. She didn't want to have to interact with people when she was writing.
So it's undeniable that we can see both of the strong women, or both of the central women in the story of Rebecca from Daphne du Maurier's life. And yes, when Rebecca was published, it was an immediate success. The publisher loved it. They thought people are going to love this book. People did love the book. It sold a lot of copies right away. And it's, in fact, never been out of print. Mm-hmm. This has been a high-demand novel for roughly 100 years.
Yeah, and it almost immediately got optioned for film.
That's right. It was a smash success. So the film was picked up by David O. Selznick, who was trying to establish this brand as the adapter of modern literature. Because he was cool, he was hip, he was with it, he got what the modern books were about.
When I see Gone with the Wind, I immediately think cool, hip, with it.
I do think it has to be said, although this is not a Gone with the Wind review, I think, Gone with the Wind is a okay movie. Mm-hmm. I think to most people we watch it.
It sure is long.
It sure is long.
There sure is a lot of it.
And there's a lot of stuff that happens, and it has some interesting story and some grand ideas in it, and that's great.
It has pretty costumes.
It has pretty costumes. I think it's easy to underestimate how much the success of Gone with the Wind is based on the success of its color photography. Mm-hmm. If you watch other movies that are made in color between 1938 and 1941, or even for the 10 years after that, they don't look very good. The 3-color process had kind of just been invented, and basically the idea is the camera cannot actually pick up all the colors. It can only pick up a few colors. So you have to design the whole picture in a way that the camera can pick up the colors and mixtures of colors that appear. That's a really hard thing to do. So in most color pictures before that, it looks like a sort of half black and white and half color picture. We might say a black and white picture where sometimes when the guy turns around, his cape is red because his cape is the proper red for the camera to pick up. So Gone with the Wind was such an expensive and troublesome production, partially because it was long and they were adapting a story and had crazy actors, but mainly because they had to get the color design of every shot exactly right. And matter of the fact is that they did. And you can watch Gone with the Wind now and it looks just like a normal color movie. That is an amazing technical and design achievement of the era. And that's really why people went to go see it in those numbers, because it was a real color movie that they'd never seen before. So great. David O. Selznick is high on both amphetamines and the success of Gone with the Wind. Although this is pre-Gone with the Wind, so I sort of take that.
Yeah, Rebecca went into production while they were still finishing editing on Gone with the Wind.
So at this point, he's just high on amphetamines. And Rebecca's his next project. And for his next project, he wants to bring in, an innovative director. And this is a little bit different than his other stories, because this is really a mystery suspense story. So who's good at mystery suspense stories? Well, there's this guy in England named Alfred Hitchcock, who's been making a bunch of mystery suspense stories that all the British people love. Maybe he could make some American movies. So David O. Selznick is the Hollywood discoverer of Alfred Hitchcock, who Mr. Hitchcock was already the most famous director in England and was something of a household name in the United States, even though his films had not been very, very widely seen. So Mr. Hitchcock was brought onto the project and was asked to write the first draft of the script. And when he turned the first draft of the script to David O. Selznick, he almost got fired from the project. Mm-hmm. David was extremely upset with his decisions to change the overall structure and characterization of the book. As we discussed before, his idea was that if you made a nominally faithful adaptation, then readers of the book were going to like the movie, and it's the readers of the book that are going to buy the most tickets. And so Hitchcock, as often, did not follow instructions and got in trouble for it. And yeah, he tried to make some big changes. He tried to make the narrator not shy and a sort of proud, open-minded and independent person. And he was like, it's kind of boring that in the first half she's like, but I feel shy about stuff. Can't we just skip that? And she's like, this is scary. That's crazy. That's a good movie. She basically said the audience isn't interested in this psychological experience of the protagonist. They just want to get to the scary parts where there's a scary lady. Let's just do the scary parts. Well, Mr. Selznick wouldn't let him do that. And
I think some of that is due to conflict with his filmmaking ethos. But I think there's probably a little bit of the producer mindset being like, Alfred, if you're not going to tell the story that's in the book, why did I spend all this money buying the rights to the book? If you want to just make a different story, let's change the title and I don't have to spend all this money.
I mean, maybe we should give, as you're saying, David Selznick some credit here, because maybe he's right. Maybe when you adapt a book for screen, you should generally try to make a nominally faithful adaptation, because a lot of people who read the book are going to see it. And somewhat to your point, because if you don't, then why adapt this book? Other than to trick people into going to see a movie just because it has a name on it? I think Alfred Hitchcock was like, great, we're going to trick a bunch of people. Yeah. And David was like, I'm actually trying to not trick people. That's my new idea. So yeah, Selznick rejected Hitchcock's script. He said, I won't read the whole quote, but he said, we have removed all the subtleties and substituted big, broad strokes. And so for the first time, and really the only time in Hitchcock's career, Hitchcock was totally barred from then on from the scripting process. He got in trouble. Mm-hmm. He was not allowed to have any influence, and he said, "Go away. I will call you back when the script is done." Now, if you know Hitchcock, you can understand, not only was this just a punishment to tell him what's going on, Selznick knew that this would be especially torturous to him.
Yeah, he had big ideas.
Hitchcock had a brand mm-hmm. that he would totally design his films in the scripting process and in the storyboarding process. And then there would be no question, no ambiguity during the filming process. Unlike a lot of directors, especially at the time, he didn't shoot a lot of coverage from different angles, which was considered the right way to do it. And then, of course, you make the movie in post, you find the angles that happen to work together. Well, he didn't want to do that. Now, as a matter of fact, he actually did do that a lot, because making a movie was hard. And he was kind of playing a bit of a Mozart bit where he tried to convince everybody that he made up everything on the spot. And he did a lot of tricks with this. Like, he would go through a very complicated process and have many different drafts of a script and storyboard. And then after the movie was done, he would make fake storyboards that exactly match what he's shown in the film, and then tell everybody that those were the real storyboards and release them as marketing materials. So he was feeding into this reputation, partially to build his own brand as a genius, and also so that when his producer told him, actually, I want you to do it a different way, he could say, I never filmed it any other different ways. He did what was considered what they called cutting in camera, where you would do the editing process and only film the exact things you wanted to film, so they couldn't make him cut it differently.
Yeah, so, there was only one shot of any given take, and you had to use it. So
David Selznick took away his ability to play that game by not letting him actually make the original script and storyboards, forcing it to be a David O. Selznick project. And ultimately, we're going to see that this film was really successful, but Alfred Hitchcock has never been particularly affectionate about it. Yeah. He's always...
And I do think it seems really different than other Hitchcock films.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think it's different because it's a faithful adaptation of a novel, which is something he was never particularly interested in. The cinematography, I think, has all of the Hitchcock trademarks, and it really looks like a Hitchcock film. You know, I don't know, but you're right, and...
it seems a lot sort of, for the most part, nicer than the typical Hitchcock film.
Well, it is no secret that most of Alfred Hitchcock's films are acclaimed for their ability to represent his internal feelings. You know, Alfred Hitchcock later became one of the saints of the auteur cinema movement. I don't know if we've ever talked about the idea of auteur cinema in this podcast, but, you know, it's basically a big idea in France in the 1970s that became really the dominant philosophy about film for the last quarter of the 20th century, which basically said, film is not about making things that are beautiful or interesting or accurate. The only reason to make film is to allow an individual to express themselves. And films are totally just an individual trying to express their feelings, and the more a film expresses an individual feelings, the more good it is, and that's it. This famously, for example, led to the B-movie comedies of the relatively silly American comedian Jerry Lewis becoming high art central focus pieces of analysis in the French literature scene, because they did really express his point of view. It doesn't matter if they were good, they expressed his point of view. And Hitchcock became one of the partially through his interviews with Francois Truffaut, became the saint of this movement, because his films, in large part, do express his really personal point of view. It does kind of appear that the main part of his personal point of view is that he has a sort of fetishistic desire to punish women who defy men. And that is kind of the main thing that his movies are really about. That's not a theme that's totally missing from this movie, as a matter of fact. And in fact, though it happens before the beginning of the novel, of the story, it is centered around a woman being killed, usually violently punished in a Hitchcock movie, for not being respectful and faithful to her man. And that is probably a reason why Hitchcock wanted to make this movie. I don't see any way around it at this point. So, when production began, let's remember that Selznick's whole bit is that he's not actually making the movie, but he is going to hire all the people and make all of the key creative decisions. So, he's also a big name here. Gone with the Wind, this huge big budget production. People want to be in this movie. Selznick's number one choice to play the protagonist is
the secondary star of his previous big hit, Olivia de Havilland.
Olivia de Havilland.
I know Vivien Leigh also wanted the role. I think she would have been so bad for it.
So, you're totally right. So he wanted Olivia, not Joan. I do not want to be in the room when Olivia found out that Joan actually got that part.
Yeah.
I do not want to be in that room. You're totally right that Vivien Leigh was also in a contention. She was in contention because Laurence Olivier had already been brought on to play Maxim, and Laurence Olivier and Vivien Leigh were having a very, very open affair and would soon be married. And so he wanted to do a movie with his girlfriend. And
I think that would have made his performance worse too.
Yeah, perhaps these
you're supposed to not look like you like her,
but we get to do kissing. So Selznick said no. Laurence Olivier was very upset about this, and as a result, was extremely mean and rude to Joan Fontaine throughout the whole production. Alfred Hitchcock.
It was definitely her fault.
I think he was trying to make her quit.
Okay.
I think he thought that if he could get her to quit halfway through the movie, they'd have to replace her with Vivien.
Okay.
I think he kept Vivien available and kept reminding David that, you could get Vivien. Alfred Hitchcock picked up on this, and he decided that this was great. And he was going to capitalize on this, and so he told everyone else working on the movie not to talk to her. And he made very clear to Joan Fontaine that, it was kind of unfortunate, but everyone on the set hates you. They think you're a prima donna and you're annoying, and they don't want to be around you at all. So just don't worry about that too much.
How many films had she been in at this point? Because I thought this was her big break.
This was her biggest role to date.
So how's she being a prima donna?
That's a good question. I think she would have said something like, I'm trying to be really nice to everyone. Yeah. And she says, well, you're not nice enough, Joan. You're not nice enough. Obviously, this is intended to mirror the experience of the protagonist. Not a very pleasant experience for the protagonist or for Joan Fontaine. Selznick also wanted to make the movie in color. He was like, I'm really good at making color movies. Did you know that they make a lot of money? And Hitchcock was able to convince him that that was a bad idea. I think most commentators in modern times feel like Hitchcock definitely had the whole point. He was like, I think it'll be more mysterious and gothic in black and white. So, David is convincible at some times. The movie was filmed on a $1.3 million budget from September to November of 1939 in California. And during the filming, Hitchcock told Judas Anderson not to blink. So this is our second no blink performance. I don't know, Libby, did you think the no blinking really made it better?
I think there's probably like a couple of shots where you don't want her to blink. I didn't notice. I think it would have been fine if she'd blinked. I think your actors are going to give you a better performance if they're not stressed.
People seem to love Judas Anderson's performance. For what it's worth, they're certainly, as we pointed out, still making jokes about it to this day. Maybe in part because she looks so stressed. But she's not emoting a lot. That's not her character. She may not be emoting a lot because her eyes really hurt. Yeah.
She's like, possible. If I move my eyes at all, I'm going to blink. Yeah. And apparently I'm not allowed to. This also goes for Joan. Like, if you want your actor to play a character who feels stressed and isolated, making them stressed and isolated does not automatically mean they are going to perform that better.
I didn't get the impression of Joan Fontaine's performance that she was really stressed. In fact, though I think it works okay because her character is supposed to be a bit naive or not very observant or whatever term we want to use for that. She seems a bit kind of blasé about everything. Then she gets really stressed. But then she kind of goes back to being kind of whatever. So I don't think it had a huge influence. I kind of agree with you that it sounds like it just made her really unhappy.
I think there is a big script problem in there, which we'll get to later.
The film was not scored by Bernard Herrmann, quote-unquote Hitchcock's composer. It was scored by Franz Waxman, who did Sunset Boulevard, probably most famously, and also did Rear Window from Hitchcock. So they had a very good relationship. I think the score in this film is excellent. Yeah, I think it is superb. It's pretty nice to listen to. I wouldn't listen to this as music. It's too cue-based to be a song, but it really fit the film great, was pleasant to listen to, and did a great job setting the tone. So I think Franz killed it. I especially liked the harps in the bedroom light reveal scene. They really helped to set the tone, and they were really nice to listen to. And I like how they played against the cinematography, or the tone, and maybe with the cinematography against the tone. I think it's also worth noting that whenever we hear Rebecca's name, the score plays this kind of blaring piano sound, which is in fact a synthesizer. This is one of the earliest cases of a synthesizer, or they didn't call it a synthesizer, an electronic piano thing being used in a film score, and I think it's used really effectively. So I like synthesizer scores. Here's yet another one that I like. Yes, this film does feature a Hitchcock cameo. I just want to get that out of the way. He's walking past the phone booth when Favell is calling and is about to getting in an argument with the policeman. It was actually supposed to be kind of bigger, but it didn't.
Yeah, I
work
did
out.
miss it.
He's just in the background, but he is technically in there. The film was released on March 21st, 1940. It made $6 million about in ticket sales. That's about a $4.7 million profit, a 366 return on investment. So not crazy numbers, but very good numbers.
Yeah.
It was definitely a critical success. I think critics were aware of Hitchcock's bit, and a lot of the reviews are kind of hesitant. It's like, oh, it's suspense and mystery and the murder.
Ooh,
and stuff.
shadows.
We get it. The film was nominated for a lot of Academy Awards. Only won 2 for Best Cinematography, George Barnes, who's a very accomplished cinematographer, and for Best Picture. So Mr. Selznick got to walk on stage and get his Oscar. And he's been asked about it several times, and Hitchcock has always said that this is not his picture. He didn't win Best Director. Apparently his directing is not that good. Everyone liked David's ideas, so whatever. It's okay. Who cares?
Was he nominated for Best Actor?
Yes.
Was this a double nominee year for him? Because in the same year, his other super famous book adaptation came out, which is Pride and Prejudice.
Oh, that is after Wuthering Heights. I guess he was originally became famous for Wuthering Heights.
Yes. Orson Welles has played Maxim. I do not believe Laurence Olivier has ever played Mr. Rochester, but he did play Heathcliff opposite Merle Oberon in, I don't think it's a very good adaptation because they completely leave out the second half. Also, Heathcliff is a very bad person, and I think people have a hard time depicting that.
Yeah, well, for what it's worth, he was also really, really mean to Merle Oberon on that.
Okay.
For what it's worth, they also really didn't get along.
He's supposed to be the one person, she's supposed to be the one person he likes.
Oh, really? I don't know those stories.
Yeah. Wuthering Heights is about Heathcliff wants to be with Kathy.
And it's cold.
But David, you gotta stop acting like you've read Wuthering Heights just because you have listened to the Kate Bush song.
What's the other Bronte? Pride and Prejudice. Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and Prejudice, not written by Bronte.
I was trying to remember what other movie we were recently discussing, but it was not Bronte. Pride and Prejudice.
Was Laurence Olivier also really mean to Greer Garson?
I don't know anything about Pride and Prejudice.
Honestly, it seems like maybe.
I'm not. I try to make it my business to know my Hollywood stars. I'm not a Laurence Olivier expert. I'll just be fair about that. I've only seen him in one other thing. One of his later roles as the bad guy in Spartacus, Stanley Kubrick's Spartacus, also a pretty good movie. He looks really different, and I was so surprised about this.
Yeah, he did age weird.
He did age weird. He really did. It's also, I think, interesting that Laurence Olivier considered himself to be a very costume and makeup-oriented actor. He said he could not act at all if he was just looking like a normal self. He had to have a wig or a mustache or white paint on his face or a big belly or something, or he couldn't do it.
Well, I do have a funny story about this. So I'm not going to say years, but definitely for months, I thought Laurence Olivier was black. Because the first film I saw him in was Othello.
That's what happened.
And he played Othello on stage, and he was like, I can't do it if I don't black up. And Iago is not a role I'm interested in.
Apparently.
Role for the person of my race.
Okay.
So I saw him play Othello opposite Maggie Smith.
Of course, this is a famously acclaimed performance. That is a fact. People liked it at the time.
And I was very confused when I saw him later. And I was like, that's a different person.
So yeah, part of the reason that you might struggle to recognize Laurence Olivier in all of his movies that he insisted on being disguised in all of his movies, so that does check out. No, the best actor that year went to James Stewart for The Philadelphia Story.
Okay. Was Laurence Olivier also nominated for Pride and Prejudice? Did he get a double nomination? Okay. Not. No one liked his Mr. Darcy.
Did you like his Mr. Darcy?
I watched the first 10 minutes of that Pride and Prejudice and turned it off because it was so terrible.
Is Mr. Darcy even in it by that point?
No, I didn't see him.
It is worth noting that another Hitchcock film was nominated for Best Picture that year, Foreign Correspondent, which is a spy movie thriller. It's about how there's going to be a war with Germany. These Germans just seem bad.
Was this a British production or
It's an American production. Or, an American production.
Were the Oscars doing British films at this point?
That's a good question that I don't know what the rules of that are.
Okay.
I'm not prepared to answer that question. It's a good question. I think mainly no is the answer. the Oscars were invented to promote the Hollywood film industry during the Depression so they could make more money. So maybe by this point they had relaxed a little bit, but I think they were trying to make more money.
Okay.
So, but yeah, Foreign Correspondent also features very prominently George Sanders. Initially,
and the third time I've seen him playing this character.
Well, initially he's this character, and then, spoilers for Foreign Correspondent, he later turns out to be, he actually is good. And he's sleazy, but good sleazy, and he becomes the good guy protagonist. He's his sleazy partner. Whenever they need to do something sleazy to get things done, George is like, I got it. He pretends to kidnap a woman and stuff like that, but it's all part of the game.
Has George ever played a leading man, or is he always either a villain or the secondary switcheroo sleazeball? Because we've also seen him in The Ghost and Mrs. Muir, where he plays a sleazeball, and he betrays Sister Margareta from The Sound of Music. And
All About Eve.
And we've seen him in All About Eve, where he's...
That's probably his most famous role.
Yeah.
Did a great job in that movie, playing roughly the same character.
Playing his one character.
So he does play... He's most famous, not to modern audiences, but at the time, he was extremely famous for playing the Saran of Gaza, a.k.a. the bad guy, in the Samson and Delilah Cecil B. DeMille biblical epic. He was big famous for that role, and that was an extremely financially successful
What
film.
year was that?
51.
Okay, so after this.
Yes, after this. And then I believe he played someone. He was in Ivanhoe. I don't know if he's the good guy or bad guy, honestly. And then he played King Richard in a King Richard movie. So I think King Richard would probably be his best option. Although a lot of King Richard movies, and I believe this one plays him as a bit of a mixed character, and I believe he's a bit of a mixed character. So yeah, big year for Alfred Hitchcock, but not really in his mind. He wasn't that impressed. Best director went to John Ford for Grapes of Wrath, also a well-acclaimed picture. It was not nominated for any BAFTAs because the BAFTAs didn't exist, and now this film has gone on to have a very strong reputation. Although it has a lower Rotten Tomatoes score than the previous film, Jane Eyre, so maybe it's just not that good. It only has a 98% rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
I think that's still too high.
Oh, interesting. Noted. That makes this our highest average Rotten Tomatoes episode by far, with an average of 99%. It has an 8.1 on IMDb. That's a very good number. On 160,000 votes. That's a lot of votes, too. So, even modern audience members are watching the movie and enjoying it, and are knowing that it's a famous Hitchcock movie that's supposed to be good.
Yeah, I think it's pulling from a lot of different camps. So there's readers, people like me who read the book and want to see it adapted, Hitchcock fans, and like auteur cinema fans, and then also Golden Age, people who like the Golden Age cinema. Everyone wants to watch this movie.
And, I think all three camps of those people are going to get more or less what they want from the film. So, at least, even if you don't particularly like the movie, it's clearly a Hitchcock film, it's clearly a Golden Age film, and it's a relatively solid literary adaptation. So, checks out. Yeah.
Do you want my opinion at this point?
Of course.
Yeah. So, this is the second time I watched it. I liked it way better this time around than the first time I watched it. The first time I watched it, I remember not liking it. This was many years ago, so I don't super remember why, but I think I had seen it after having read the book and after having seen the 97 version, and I just watched this because this was a big, famous adaptation. So I think I was mainly comparing it to the 97 film, and when I saw it this time, I was mainly comparing it to Jane Eyre. So I was like, well, not everything's perfect, but at least they're pretty much doing the story.
As an adaptation, I feel like I'm very honestly pleased with it as an adaptation. Making it in a time of censorship for a director that really wants to make money with limited artistic freedom. I think they did a great job, and I was extremely pleased with how they adapted the book. And I think you just have to accept that this is a picture postcard version of Rebecca. Like, this is Rebecca if it was made as like a wordless graphic novel for teenagers, which would be a good way to experience Rebecca. But yeah, it's the children's Rebecca told on film, despite its mature themes, and that's okay.
Yeah, one of the things now I know some people are going to be mad at me about this, but I really preferred Diana Riggs, Mrs. Danvers, to Judith Anderson's. Diana Rigg is playing her like an actual human, and Judith Anderson is playing her like some creepy machine. Yeah,
Diana Rigg is also like a big, tall person. And in that miniseries, you really feel that constantly. her like presence.
She's also a lot older. Like,
Yes, she's also a lot older. Yeah.
Judith Anderson doesn't really look that much older than Joan Fontaine, maybe 10 years, but Diana Rigg was like in her 60s or 70s.
That was actually something I didn't like about the Amelia Fox miniseries, or film, as I call it, where I didn't like that Danvers was so much older than Rebecca would have been, it felt like.
Yeah, so Mrs. Danvers, we don't get her age in the story, but we do know that she's been Rebecca's maid since before Rebecca was married.
In the novel...
So she was definitely an adult when Rebecca was a child.
Well, in the novel, you're right, it does say that, and I believe that the film, the Amelia Fox film, is faithful to the novel in that way, and you're right, it does specifically say the child. Of course, in the Hitchcock film, they change it, and they say that Danvers and Rebecca met when the marriage occurred, kind of implying that Rebecca was older than Danvers at that time. And I just think that it's better, to me, to have Danvers and the protagonist sort of be on equal footing. Both people that looked up to Rebecca and didn't know her whole life in that way, to see how their reactions are very different. So I kind of, again, didn't mind the Hitchcock interpretation. I thought it was pretty good there, but it's a fair point. And yeah, in the Amelia Fox version, Danvers is not a joke. In this version, she's a joke a bit. Ha ha, scary wooden lesbian lady. In the Amelia Fox version, she is a character, and we feel some sympathy for her, and we try to understand her perspective. So yeah, the film was a smash success, all things considered. Had a lot of cultural influence. In Spain, this film was really popular. Okay. And the jacket that the protagonist wears out on the beach and stuff, or I believe
in Monty or in
England? In England, her sort of brown pocketed jacket became a very popular style of jacket and is still known today as a Rebecca jacket in Spain. So they're out there selling Rebecca jackets.
Do they come with a free handkerchief with the R embroidered on it?
That's a really
good idea.
Is that
part of it?
Then you could pull it out in public and
feel sad
and look down and then look at people next to you and be really sad.
Yeah.
That would be great. That would be great. It inspired many adaptations, interpretations. As you pointed out, there are 3 official post-novels. I don't even remember what they are. One of them is about Rebecca.
Yeah, sequel
things that were approved.
No one's writing sequels.
There is a sequel.
Oh, there is a sequel.
There is a sequel about the next part of the second Mrs. De Winter's life with Maxim.
I feel like Daphne covered it.
I'm not... I think you told me that the Daphne was dead by the time these novels were produced.
I don't know about the sequel, so I don't know.
All right. Well, I don't know them. Stephen King wrote The Bag of Bones, which is a commentary interpretation sort of sequel to, retelling of Rebecca. So it's definitely had massive cultural
Did he move
influence.
it to Maine?
I assume so. I'm not
presumably.
But that checks out. I mean, I've seen worse. There are worse places in the United States to compare to Cornwall. I think that's fair enough.
Yeah, well, this is all filmed in California.
You're right.
I feel like they needed to get more shots of the Pacific. Like, there were clearly some of the locations are happening at the Pacific. I just wanted some shots of, like, the ocean. Ooh, it's violence, threatening.
Yeah,
She's in there.
We do get a bit of that, but not...
And the 97 one gives us a lot of ocean shots in that one with big swelling music. That's what the credits play over.
Yeah, Hitchcock specifically said that he think it was good that they did not make the movie in England, which they didn't do because there was like a war going on.
Yeah.
And this film did start production right after the invasion of Germany, and most of the cast was British.
Invasion of Poland?
Thank you. The invasion of Poland, and most of the cast was British, and it led to a very somber mood on the set. Mm-hmm. But yeah, he said that if they had filmed it in England, they would have been really tempted to show off the English countryside and the lanes that lead up to the house and sort of try to set it in its place. And he thought that the character... Okay, is it pronounced Manderley or Mandalay?
Neither. It's Manderley. It's the ending is Ley, and everyone wants to turn this into lay, but that's not how it works. So Manderley.
Manderley, not Mandully.
Yeah, there's an R in it.
Well,
I mean, British people...
You tell me.
British English is a non-rhotic dialect, so they say Manderley. If you're an American, you say...
But they want us to say Manderley.
Yeah.
That's what they... Okay, Manderley. Thank you. So he said that Manderley was a character in the story in its own right, and the isolated location was not only kind of mysterious and spooky, but was symbolic of the character's isolation in her personal experience. And so he did not want it to be set in England. He did not want establishing shots of the countryside. He never mentioned the sea. And I think that would have been a good compromise, frankly. I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
The sea is a character in a way just like the house is a character. They're both haunted by Rebecca.
And also, if they had been filming in England, I think they would have run into the problem that they couldn't actually burn the house down. If they were filming on location at an actual ancestral home, most families / the National Trust are not going to let you burn it down for your movie. So I think that they also got around that problem in the Jane Eyre that we watched, where they actually can burn the set down.
Yeah, well, of course, this film is famous for not being filmed in any big house.
Yeah.
So they very much wanted to make it in the United States because they wanted it to be an American production, not a British production, and Britain was a bit busy at the moment. So it was going to be the United States, and David O. Selznick paid a lot of money to scout basically every big house in the United States, trying to find one that he thought had the right tone and style, and he said he just couldn't find one. So that was the original plan.
Manderley is kind of based on two different 16th century English buildings, and we weren't making super fancy houses in America in the 16th century.
Right. So Rebecca is not filmed at a big house. It's effectively filmed all in miniature. We say miniature.
Well, the exterior shots of the house are miniature.
That's right. The grand shots of the house are shot in miniature. And by miniature, we mean giant miniatures that would fill up an entire soundstage, or miniatures that were 50 feet
Just a
wide.
really impressive doll's house.
Libby, I know you know a lot about some of the effects and the production process of these shots and some of the other shots. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about how these effects happen.
Yeah, so they had two different scales of miniature that they filmed, like when the perspective shot when Mrs. De Winter is driving up to Manderley and she's seeing it through the windshield wipers. They also burned down the miniature, and I think they had to adjust the frame rate or something, or they had to speed it up or slow it down to make the flames look realistic on this small scale. And, you know, they were much more willing to burn down their miniature house than their actual sets. So I think only that one set with Mrs. Danvers gets burned. Judith Anderson was really in there pretty close to flames. So she had her asbestos-lined dress. I did notice that Mrs. Danvers' dress is very long.
Yeah.
I wonder if that was part of it.
Yeah, that checks out.
We can talk more about her dress in a minute. Also, a lot of the interior shots, they only built up like half of the set. They didn't build the entire set. They did matte paintings for the ceiling. So you do one exposure where the actors are actually walking around interacting with the set. And then anything that's going to be above their heads, you draw that and do a second exposure on the top half of the film or the top quarter of the film. So this means that they wanted to do that because they wanted Mrs. De Winter to look very small in this very big house with fireplaces that are like the biggest fireplaces I've ever seen. I don't think they would have been able to find those in a house, even in England. So yeah, she does kind of look like a tiny child in this giant house. And I think that also means that because they weren't they weren't filming the real ceilings, they were able to hang lights from up there, kind of like on a stage where you have like multiple rows of lights. So they were able to get really precise lighting, which of course Hitchcock likes in order to capture all of his shadows.
You can tell when you watch this that it's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. You can tell because it's based around three big themes: fear of the police, a desire to punish improper women, and falling from a great height. I assume that this is what Joan from Joan at a Window was a reference to in your title, is that moment with Mrs. Danvers. I'm not sure
there's that moment. There's also the earlier one where she sees her closing the window in the West Wing.
That's right.
And then that prompts her to go into the West Wing. Yes.
Just to keep myself straight, what is it a reference to in Jane Eyre? I don't quite remember the big window there.
After the bed fire, she looks through a window as Rochester goes into the attic into the West Wing of Thornfield to make sure Grace Poole has gotten everything back as it should be.
And she sees this and this clues her that there's something of a mystery.
Yes.
I see. Some not too different from
I think there might also be another one. There's a couple compelling shots of Joan being out a window in that one.
Checks out.
Also, the other reason I picked Joan at a window is because when you were standing at a window, you were kind of isolated, separated from whatever it is. So, there's thematic levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's interesting to compare two characters other than our protagonist and Mr. Bad Guy, or Mr. Broody Man.
Mr. Boyfriend.
That do have a direct corollary. One is Grace Poole and Mrs. Danvers, who are presented in very, very different lights. Grace is nice, right? She's nice.
Yeah, so Grace, initially, all of these bad things that are actually being done by Bertha are being attributed to Grace.
Right, exactly.
So, we think Grace has bitten Mr. Mason.
Sure.
We think Grace has set the bed on fire.
Mm-hmm.
Grace is actually a fake out.
Mm-hmm.
So she actually acts fairly normal.
Mm-hmm.
I think she's lower class, so she seems
She has a regional accent.
She has a regional accent.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she has a hard job, so she's kind of stressed.
Yeah.
One thing that goes on in the book, one of Jane's musings, which generally doesn't get included because it would be hard to express, is at one point Jane is like, why does Mr. Rochester keep Grace Poole around if she is such a threat? If she's attempted to kill him in his bed? And she's like, maybe they're lovers? Grace is actually a pretty similar age to Mr. Rochester. Okay. I think they, in a lot of adaptations, they make her older.
Yeah.
And she is looking at it and she's like, man, I just don't see it. I don't think Mr. Rochester would be into Grace. And maybe that says more about Jane Eyre than it says about Grace. But she's like, well, maybe they used to be lovers. I can definitely see that 10 years ago, Grace might have been more of a catch. And so maybe he's just keeping her around because of that. And Grace is officially around to, quote, do the sewing.
Lots of sewing in that house. So much sewing.
Well, she has to sew new...
Yeah, there is actually lots of sewing.
Yeah.
Not that Jane knows about, but...
Add new hooks to the curtains for the bed.
I bet it's a big problem. The other big character is, of course, the first wife.
Yeah.
Bertha and Rebecca. And it seems like Rebecca is an interpretation of Bertha, a very traditional interpretation of Bertha, I guess, of the evil Bertha. Mm-hmm. There's no sympathy in that interpretation.
Yeah, I think Daphne du Maurier didn't want us to be sympathetic to Rebecca. There's a important characterization aspect that was cut from this, and I think it is actually included in the 97. So obviously Maxim didn't like Rebecca, so I'm not totally sure that we can take his word for it. I don't think he's a fair judge of her character necessarily. But Mrs. Danvers also describes the story of when Rebecca was young, when she's still a teenager, of her whipping a horse until it bled because she wanted to break it and get the horse to behave.
In the movie, it says she just rides a horse that is very rebellious and she refuses to not be ridden. Although he does say until it's sweaty and bloody.
Yeah.
And people who ride horses know that the way that people, especially at this time, people rode horses when they were bad is they would beat them. So I think people could put the pieces together.
Yeah, Mrs. Danvers talks about hitting the horse with a whip and digging in her spurs. Mm-hmm. So Rebecca did abuse animals.
Yeah, that's in the movie. Again, I think it's censored, but it's in there.
Yeah, and also Ben didn't like Rebecca.
Right.
I honestly think the way they used Ben in this film, they should have just cut him because they didn't use him actually effectively. Ben actually has a big heroic moment in the book, and it's included in the 97 adaptation, where he lies about...
That's in this one too.
No, he just refuses to talk.
He knows, though.
He's being... Yeah, right, but he doesn't actively lie.
Oh, I see.
In the book, he doesn't super get what's going on, but he knows that he wants to protect the new Mrs. De Winter. So he does lie when directly questioned by Colonel Julian, but before they do the...
I think in the Diana Rigg, Amelia Fox version, it's he only lie I remember is when he's being questioned by Favell a little bit, and he says, "Have you ever seen me before?" And he says, "No."
Yeah, well, he's being questioned by Favell and Julian.
Yeah, he's there. You're right.
Yeah, so there is an official police.
I thought that the way they did it was very effective. I didn't like, frankly, the way that I think the actress that played Ben in the Amelia Fox production did not do a very good job. Mm-hmm. And the character was fine or whatever.
Yeah.
It filled the role.
I mean, the character clearly has Down syndrome, and it's hard to get Down syndrome actors.
Fair. But I think the way that the film handled it was was good. We still knew that Ben didn't like Rebecca, and he's the first person that tells us that maybe Rebecca is bad. He makes that clear, and he makes it clear that he lies at the coroner to save Maxim. So they checked off the boxes at least. I think giving him a small, simple role was appropriate for the story.
Mm-hmm. I just feel like with one extra question from the coroner or whoever that was, we could have included. It would have taken less than 10 seconds to give Ben an actual heroic moment, which was a big thing for a mentally ill character.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right that Hitchcock doesn't do that because he doesn't want to give a heroic moment to a mentally ill character, and that's not funny enough, frankly, for what he's trying to do in the movie. So I do think it's a fundamentally fair criticism. Well, you say that Du Maurier does not want us to sympathize with Rebecca. For one thing, for what it's worth, Alfred Hitchcock did, or something along those lines. He said, Truffaut asked him, do you think Rebecca is a psychopath? And he said, I never thought of her as a psychopath, rather as someone who lived her life fully, even if she wasn't nice. And though obviously she is presented in this aggressively and nominally villainous way in the story, and she does things that are horrible, like beating up animals, I don't think we can forget the fact that Du Maurier was representing her own story.
Yeah.
And
I think Daphne du Maurier also has some self-loathing going on.
I think you're right. I mean, the fundamental, once we find out the reveal, the message of the story basically seems to be that, well, when we find out that Maxim killed Rebecca, it's really notable, and I think stronger even in the book than it is in the movie.
Mm-hmm. Well, because in the movie, he didn't kill Rebecca.
Yeah. Well, to talk about that, obviously this is an issue of censorship. Yeah. As you noted already, you're not allowed to have a husband kill the spouse and they get away with it, which is the whole plot of the book. And I have to say that I'm very happy with how they handled it.
Yeah,
I think they handled it as well as they could, because he does kill Rebecca.
Yeah.
He hits her in the head and then she falls down and dies. He says it was an accident. I don't believe him, honestly. I think he just regular killed her and he told her that. And even if that is exactly what happened, you are still going to jail and you're a murderer, and that doesn't help. So I think it's as good of a compromise as anyone could ask for.
And also later after they've talked to Dr. Baker, right towards the end, Laurence Olivier says, well, I didn't kill Rebecca, but I can tell that she wanted me to kill her. And you can just delete the line, I didn't kill Rebecca, and they're still giving you all of the, like, if you've read the book, it's very easy to make the switch in your mind. So,
and even somebody watching the movie, I think, well, of course, they didn't necessarily all drive cars but on their walking home on the way from the theater, I think we could imagine the theaters going, well, he did really kill her. He hit her in the head, and I don't believe him. So they do not absolve him. They give space for him to be nominally guilty. I thought they handled it great. And I've heard a lot of complaints about, well, he doesn't really kill her in the novel. He does. Let him have the movie, guys. That's my opinion. Sounds like we're on the same page. But once we discover this, a really notable fact is that our protagonist is really happy about this. She's really happy that her husband killed his ex-wife. And in the novel, it's clear that she's happy about it before she figures out that, like, he had a maybe good reason or it was an accident or whatever. She's just happy about it because it meant that he didn't love her.
Yeah.
This is also an experience from Daphne du Maurier's life. Her husband had a previous engagement to a sexy lady from Southern Europe that was considered really attractive and really charismatic, and she died due to suicide during the World War II, maybe because during the World War II, maybe because her husband was now married to Daphne, and that meant they could no longer be together.
Her lover was now married to Daphne.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. This is an experience that Daphne, I think, again, is appreciating from both sides, as both the other woman and then in her own relationship with her husband where she was not faithful to him. And part of this story is a wish fulfillment fantasy for people who get married to someone who's already been married. And it's tapping into what I guess you would say is a very natural desire to discover that your spouse never loved the original person. And what more crystalline way could we demonstrate that by having them kill them? And it's a wish fulfillment fantasy.
And I think it's simultaneously an act of self-hatred to portray yourself as an evil lesbian who deserved death.
And I just to totally agree with what you said there, I think we have to... The film's message is basically, if you're... The book's message fundamentally is, if your spouse is mean, unfaithful, and incestuous, then you're allowed to kill them. That's 3 strikes. And at that point, if you kill them, it's fine.
I think that they do include going to die anyway.
Maxim doesn't know that when we find out, and we've...
Right, but I don't think he thinks it's fine. Clearly,
Maxim thinks it's fine.
He thinks he's culpable. He thinks he's legally culpable.
Oh, yeah. I don't think the book's saying you're not going to go to jail. Mm-hmm. But the book is saying that it's good. That's probably the right thing to do. And the book really encourages us at that moment to be like, yeah, you probably should have killed her. That sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I like about the experience of reading the book is how I get, like, emotionally manipulated towards the end when Mrs. De Winter is watching Maxim being questioned and she's getting more and more nervous until she passes out. I also don't want the investigator to figure it out. And I'm like, oh my God, here I am rooting for a murderer to get away.
Yeah, not a murderer who was, as we were supposed to have in a movie, a murderer who was actually scared for his own life, or he was a communist spy or something like that. No, just a murderer who killed his wife because he was mad at his wife. And then we are expected to be like, yeah, I'd kill her too. Sure, totally checks out. And so, with that, intentionally shocking, and one thing I mentioned that some people, not me because I have not read the book, but I know some people bring up negative feelings about Jane Eyre. They say it lacks moral complexity. Mm-hmm. It's all obvious, and it's just, feel this way about this thing. Let's look at it. No one could have that criticism of Rebecca.
Yeah.
This is the masterpiece of moral complexity and moral ambiguity, and I don't think it's worth trying to cut up, maybe we'll do it a little bit, kind of cut up what the right thing and the wrong thing was to do. But if you do like books and stories that don't let you have a right answer and don't let you really sympathize with any character, then you'll really like Rebecca. Now, maybe that's not the type of book you want, and then you might not like it. Mm-hmm. But I don't think anyone could say, somewhat similarly, I don't think anyone could say that there's no character development in Rebecca. Mm-hmm. There is the most explicit and direct. At the beginning, she is really shy and can't express her feelings. And at the end, she's not. Also, at the beginning, she's kind of happy and naive. And at the end, she's kind of sad and world-weary. There's such nominal character development. Again, you could never bring that criticism.
And they actually handle this really badly in this film. There's one huge problem that I have, which is maybe the most important line, or at least the most important line of dialogue in this book is, I am Mrs. De Winter now, which comes way too early in the film. It's supposed to come after the protagonist finds out that Maxim killed Rebecca and he didn't actually love her. Like, that is what she needed in order to become a fully realized person. She does it earlier, and thus presumably it's sort of fakely.
I think I disagree with you, although I can really appreciate what you're saying. And I do agree that this is a departure from the...
Even if she does feel like she is Mrs. De Winter now and she wants to tell Mrs. Danvers what to do, in the scene immediately after that, she says, I want to throw a costume ball like Rebecca did.
Yes.
And I want to manage everything.
Yes.
That's not what happened in the book. Beatrice and Giles bring up the ball in the book. But I think any confidence that she has gained from saying I'm Mrs. De Winter now is totally undermined by Maxim's reaction to her costume. And then she never gets that again later. So I think it doesn't work.
I think that's good analysis. I'm not sure I agree it doesn't work.
Okay.
So you're right that it's in the book, it's Giles' idea. Also in the book, it's not... She doesn't volunteer to, like, organize it. And she's not like, I can do it. She's
think she does actually say, like, I don't think she says I'll do the whole thing, but I think she says, like, yeah, I can do some stuff. And Maxim's like, no, Frank will handle it all.
That's right. But in the movie, she's like, no, I want to do it.
Yeah.
And I really like this part. Mm-hmm. One thing I don't like about the book is that her ability to find confidence in herself exclusively comes from the finding out the big mystery and that Maxim didn't love Rebecca. Although obviously that's a very psychological thing and adds up in the book. I'm not saying it's bad writing. It's not as entertaining and interesting to me. Mm-hmm. And I don't know, it's less feminist. I like that in this version, she is able to kind of solve her problems on her own. She realizes, I can be confident. I'm a rich, powerful lady now. I can do whatever I want. And I want to be confident. I want to be capable. I'm going to take on the world. And I like that she does the costume party. And I think in the book, and somewhat in the film, it's like, oh, that's Rebecca's thing. You're trying to be Rebecca. I like that in the movie. She had coming at it from her own perspective. She's trying to be very practical. She's just come back from all of her visits. Everyone's asking her about the costume ball. She realizes it's a sort of a regional charity thing for the spirits of the region. And she's like, well, that sounds nice, actually. And I like a party, let's do it. I'll do it too. And so I like that it's her idea for her own reasons. And I also like that, just as you're saying, that she loses that momentum. I guess maybe I love my losers, but I like that it's not that she's just a weak person and she's too weak, and so someone has to solve her problems. She can't solve her own problems, but then she runs into some new problems. Then that messes everything up again. I like that structure of a story, and I like that she had that moment of her own success.
Yeah, I think we do also lose out on a characterization element from Maxim, which we do kind of still get in the first scene when they arrive at Manderley, where he says, "You don't have to make a speech. I'll do it." Which is that, like, Maxim can tell that she's awkward and shy and doesn't really want to interact with people. So I think when he says in the book, Frank can do all the invitations and organize the ball, he's like, "I'm trying to be nice. Like, I'm trying to spare you this work that you don't want." But she is receiving that information as, "You don't think I can do it. I'm just a annoying burden."
Mm-hmm.
Can I talk about her art real quick?
Please.
So we do see a couple of her drawings, and they're way worse than I thought they would be, and they're worse than in the 97 ones. And I felt like we were being kind of mean to her by being like, she's not good at talking to people, and she's also not even good at art.
They're rough, but they're good. I think her sketches are fine.
I think her sketches for the costumes are actually okay.
Yeah.
But we see those like an hour after her portrait of Maxim, which is bad.
I think her portrait of Maxim is a good caricature. I think Maxim has not been paying attention to art very recently and doesn't know what caricature is.
I'm totally ignoring what Maxim says about it.
Okay.
I think I think his nose looks weird. So going back to how you like losers,
Okay.
I'm curious about your thoughts on the end of the film for our lovers. We'll put aside Mrs. Danvers for now. So I'm going to read the last paragraph of the book.
Not the first paragraph of the book, because there is a bit of a circular structure here, just to make sure I'm following.
Yes, I'm reading.
I'm sure you know, but I'm tracking for myself.
Yes, I'm reading the last paragraph of the book.
Because it does really stand out to me that none of the films, I guess this one kind of, none of the films adapt it in the way the book tells it, where there's an opening prologue where they're in Egypt. No, we just hear random
they're not in Egypt.
voiceover.
It's unclear where they are.
I thought they said Egypt.
They do not say Egypt.
Okay. But I
honestly, I think they're in Monte Carlo. It's not explicit, but I think it makes sense for them to be in Monte Carlo.
Okay. But yeah, I'm surprised that none of them have the prologue in the way that the book does.
Yeah, I think the 97 version kind of does all of the prologue at the end. So you get the last night I dreamed I went to Manderley as the opening of the epilogue, and then you see them in a sun-kissed Mediterranean clime and not rainy old England.
That's what you're going to ask me about, I think.
Okay. So last paragraph of the book. One thing that's different from the movie is that she goes with Maxim to Dr. Baker. I'm not totally sure why they didn't include that. Why she doesn't go with them. It's basically the only scene that she's not in, which is weird. Was this a Hays Code thing that, like, women aren't allowed to talk about other women's health care?
I don't know a censorship reason. And I wouldn't guess that that's true. It's a good guess, honestly.
Yeah.
I also find it really odd because I've heard Hitchcock comment that the film is supposed to be from her perspective, and that's very much how the book is told. And I don't know why she's not there. I guess the answer is they didn't really feel like she had anything to do. And now it's time for the men to solve the problem. I guess I can't find an answer.
Yeah.
I can't find it.
Anyway, so the last paragraph of the book, they are driving back from London, and they've been going all night, so it's like 3 a.m. She says, "He did not answer, and I went on watching the sky. It seemed to get lighter even as I stared, like the first red streak of sunrise. Little by little, it spread across the sky. 'It's in winter that you see the northern lights, isn't it?' I said. 'Not in summer.' 'That's not the northern lights,' he said. 'That's Manderley.' I glanced at him and saw his face. I saw his eyes. 'Maxim?' I said. 'Maxim, what is it?' He drove faster, much faster. We topped the hill before us and saw Lanyon laying in a hollow at our feet. There to the left of us was the silver streak of the river widening to the estuary at Carith 6 miles away. The road to Manderley lay ahead. There was no moon. The sky above our heads was inky black, but the sky on the horizon was not dark at all. It was shot with crimson like a splash of blood, and the ashes blew towards us like salt wind from the sea." So we're not even really directly being told that it's caught on fire.
Yeah, well, of course, that conversation is shown in the film, but not at the very end.
Yes, and he also has it with Frank, not with...
Oh, that's right. I forgot about that. You're right.
But so the book ends before they even get back to Manderley. We don't really see them interacting with fire. Whereas in the film, she stayed there the whole time. Maxim is frantically searching for her, and he eventually finds her with Jasper. Don't worry, the dog lives.
They know what's up.
And they embrace, kind of like they finally get to be together. Like Manderley was holding them back, and burning it has liberated them. But that's really not the point of the book at all. The film doesn't include how much Maxim loves Manderley.
Mm-hmm.
He sort of portrays it as a prison. So whenever he talks about it at all. So it being burned is a liberation, which allows for their happy ending. But book Maxim does really care about Manderley.
He cares about the family line and his history, etc. This is their estate.
Yeah, and this is why Rebecca is able to needle him so much.
Right.
Because saying that, like, we're going to raise a son that's not actually your son. You have to do what I say, otherwise I'll do all of my sinning in public and ruin the name of Manderley in the House of De Winter or whatever. The House of Manderley in the name of De Winter. So in the book, they lose a lot more. Maxim loses his house, and now Mrs. De Winter has to live with a sad husband. So do you like the book ending better than the film ending?
Yeah, well, I'm going to struggle to answer your question, although I think it's a great question.
Okay.
I mean, technically he loses the same amount in both versions. It's just that in one version he cares about what he's lost, in the other version he doesn't.
And he's maybe in fact happy to lose it.
Indeed. And you're totally right that Manderley is an evil house and he's trapped there. I'll make clear, because you're asking me on a very personal level, that I do struggle to answer this question because I personally identify so much more with movie Max than book Max. Okay. That's just my personality. I am not attached to giant houses. I do not want a giant house. I am not attached to aristocratic tradition and family line pride. I am not. If you know me, you know I am not into those things. Mm-hmm.
This might have something to do with it. Maxim also grew up in that house. He's lived in that house for his entire life. You've moved a lot.
That's exactly right. I have no childhood home nostalgia. Yeah. I have no experience.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sitting here in the house I grew up at. I would be very sad if it burned down, even though it is not an aristocratic mansion that my family has owned for generations.
There is no house that I've lived in. I've actually lived in some very nice houses and some very not nice houses, and none of them would I care. They don't mean nothing to me. So that's why I appreciate your point about my desire to love losers. To answer your real question, do I think that's a better story? Does this fulfill my loser thing? Sure. Yeah, it does.
The novel.
The novel does. It does. And I've already said that Rebecca is, I believe, the number one success when you talk about creating an interesting, morally complex and sentiment complex story. And I like that when I read the book, at the end, I feel really torn. So in that sense, I love it. I love that she is putting the situation, which kind of seems nice, and maybe in some situations for some people would be really nice, but also I get to really understand why it's not nice for them. And that makes me a more empathetic and thoughtful person. And gives me multiple emotions to feel, which can be more entertaining. So I think it's a great ending, even though, to me, I kind of have the Hollywood feeling about it. And I like that pairing.
Yeah, and one thing that is really gently suggested in the book, it's not canon, but I think if you put enough pieces together, this is a more coherent answer. I think it's implied in the book that Maxim is blind in the sort of a prologue.
Obviously,
in the 15 years later.
Makes sense. I think this is because she's reading the newspapers to him.
Yeah, so it kind of seems like he can't read the newspapers. Like the only way he's getting this, she's able to hide information from him by not reading about those parts in the newspaper, and he won't ever find out. Now, maybe he just chooses to never read the newspaper, but
I think it's intentionally ambiguous.
Also, maybe he can't. Also, we know that this book very much inspired by Jane Eyre, and it's kind of unclear to what extent this is like a retelling of Jane Eyre with a very different type of protagonist and set in the modern world. For Daphne, or to what extent this is a Gothic novel and Jane Eyre established so many elements of the Gothic genre.
The intentionally ambiguous version of Maxim, where he is maybe blind, is the correct reading. I don't think it's the correct reading to say he's definitely blind. Again, I think Du Maurier
also, there's different levels of blindness. Mr. Rochester,
as we find out,
gradually becomes less blind.
No comment on the medical situation there, but you're right.
No, that's true. I mean, you can become less blind.
Sure. And so I think we should give du Maurier credit for engineering the sensation in me that I'm experiencing. She wants me to think, it's kind of, some people would like that. For some people, that's the right type of luxury. And maybe everything's fine, but also maybe everything's not. Maybe Rebecca still doesn't really feel comfortable being...
Rebecca?
The protagonist still doesn't feel...
You can call her Mrs. De Winter. She is Mrs. De Winter now.
That's a good point. Maybe Mrs. De Winter doesn't feel comfortable telling us the truth. Still, she doesn't really trust us and doesn't think that we can handle it. I would buy that too. So, again, I think this fits well into there are different ways to interpret the story. I almost struggle to fully engage with the Hitchcock ending. It's so abrupt and it's so Hollywood. It doesn't mean anything.
Also, they're like, yeah, okay, these kids, whatever. Let's talk about Mrs. Danvers.
Yeah. I think that I do like the interpretation, again, because I can identify it with better, that Maxim feels imprisoned by living in a giant fancy house, how I would feel not excited. So it's easy for me to identify. And so, I kind of like the ending. If I was living in a giant house I didn't want to, and then it burned down, I would rush back, try to find my spouse, make sure they were okay, and then they're okay, I'd be like, great, I don't have to live there anymore. So it kind of checks out to me in my mind. So I'll give it a thumbs up, but I don't have a strong, it's just a Hollywood ending. Just a Hollywood ending. Now, you're right about Mrs. Danvers.
Well, can I talk about Mrs. Danvers' costume for a little bit before we get into her closing shot? She's in this really long dress. Judith Anderson isn't a particularly tall person, which is very weird for the 1930s as, like, day wear, and also very weird for a housekeeper. Like, she's got work to do. A floor-length gown is not going to be helpful. I think one of the reasons for this is that if you look very closely, you can see that Judith Anderson is wearing very high heels. Like, higher heels than anyone was wearing in the 1930s, and shoes that are totally impractical for a housekeeper. So, kudos to her for having to put up with that while at work. So the dress is kind of trying to conceal her ridiculous shoes. But also this whole thing creates an impression of having very long legs. She looks very disproportionate.
I mean, I think most people believe that this is an intentional effect to make her look ghost-like. People always talk about how she looks as if she's gliding around the room. And this is because you cannot see her feet. So for what the part you can see, she's gliding. Also, it's maybe worth noting that Hitchcock very intentionally, to help with this problem, never shows Danvers entering a room except for at the final part where she walks into the interview with the police officer, which he shouldn't have shown her entering the room there. I think that was a really poor decision. You could have there were better, more. Favell should have said, "Well, let's cast Danny," and then she should have turned around. And she should have been there. She's
just already been there.
So the point is like, she's always around, and she's like a ghost lady. All right, that's fine. That's for our scary movie. And I think the long dress is partially there just to hide her feet, so she looks more ghostly.
Well, in that last scene in the inn where Favell calls her in, I think it's okay to treat her differently there. She also looks way more emotional. She basically doesn't emote for the whole film. And then she feels that, like, one of the reasons it seems like she's been reconciled to Rebecca's death is that it wasn't a man and it wasn't a woman who claimed her. It was the sea. But now she's like, she was actually just killed by a human. I can't imagine Rebecca as this, like, supernatural, superhuman, whatever.
I think Danvers thought
and I think she's also really mad at Maxim.
I think Danvers thought if Maxim had tried to strangle her, Rebecca would have just been able to beat him off with his fist.
Yeah.
And when she realized, that's not actually happened, that breaks her. So yeah, I do agree with you. Still shouldn't have shown her walk in the room. You gotta do the movie. We're doing a cinema thing here. You're Alfred Hitchcock.
I think it works. Like, Mrs. Danvers, her ghostliness is over. She's not a threat anymore.
But she's pretty ghostly. She's not, I don't know. She does burn down their house and stuff.
Yeah, well, in this film, that's good, as you mentioned.
All right, fine. Fair enough. I really like that in the novel, we don't, as you pointed out, see the house burn down. And perhaps more importantly, we don't know for certain that Danvers started the fire. We can pretty much guess that she did.
Yeah.
And more importantly, we definitely don't know that she died in the fire.
She canon escapes. They call back, and someone says something about they saw Mrs. Danvers running away from the house.
Wait, I thought you just read me the very end of the book.
No, it happens before that.
I thought you said that was the last pair. Oh, before that?
Yeah.
I see. Before they know that it's on fire, they know that Danvers left.
Yeah.
Understood. All right. So yeah, we then know that Danvers escapes. And I think this is really important to allowing this sort of dark feeling to happen in the book, because when you read the book, it would be maybe natural to be like, oh, these 30s people or whatever, they're just so afraid of scandal. So people will find out that something bad happened, and if you really want to live there, you can rebuild Mandalay with your insurance money that you definitely got. So they can just rebuild it, and it'll be a fun story. It'll be fine, really. Okay, it's something bad that happened. But they cannot stay there, because Mrs. Danvers is going to kill them.
Yeah.
They are on the run from a murderer. It's not, and that's why they maybe can't live a very public life. They say when they're in their hotels, they can't go to the big hotels because someone might see them. Because they're afraid of scandal? No, because then Mrs. Danvers will find them and kill them. And so that's scary, that's creepy, that adds to the atmosphere of the book, and it gives us a good reason to feel sad at the end. Maybe there's some questionable reasons. Everyone has their own tastes and emotions. It's definitely bad to have a murderer after you, and Mr. Danvers will murder them. We all agree that would definitely happen. So that's a nice thing for the book, and I think it would make for a good Hitchcock movie. If I would have liked it more if Danvers had not done her dance at the top floor, and we saw her slipping out the back and looking side eyes at the characters and doing murderer fingers at them. That would have been great. And that would have made it even better. And then we can have our happy Hollywood ending and also our dark Hitchcock ending. I think that would have been a better choice.
Would David have let him do that?
No. Okay. Well, actually, he should have, because that's in the book. So Hitchcock is only bringing it closer to the book. I think David would have let them do it because he wanted a Hollywood movie, and he would have said, that's not Hollywood enough. Maybe. I'm not sure. I don't know who. For what it's worth, Hitchcock didn't write the script. Yeah. That's the answer. Not Hitchcock's fault. So, not Hitchcock's fault. I mean, they kill her because of homophobia. They kill her because she's a lesbian lady and so she has to die. And because they think the audience wants to see this lesbian be burned alive for pleasure. That's why it's in the movie. Although I guess we don't see her burned alive.
We come really close.
Hitchcock was very critical of this picture later on, and he said that it was an old-fashioned... He said the story belongs to 1910. That's something that's really interesting to me because I feel like it's actually a pretty timeless story. I mean, one of the big themes is about a broader change that's happening in English society, about a liberalization, a flattening of the economic and social structure, and so I can see it partially being about that experience. I actually like that the film sets it in the 40s or 30s, or I guess in the 30s, sets it in the 30s, not like the Diana Rigg version, which is very much in 20s, and it's kind of a criticism of the wild life of the 20s and how that was not good, which I don't think lands particularly well. And even though I do think the Mrs. Van Hopper character in that performance is so good in that style. Hitchcock also said that he feels like the story has a big plot hole. And I've heard other people say this, and I'm just not sure I agree. So he says that it's a big plot hole that Maxim was able to identify a false body because the unknown woman's body was discovered and he can pretend like that's Rebecca. And that's a big plot hole because that's a crazy coincidence and it's so lucky that there's just a random unknown body shows up at the convenient time. He said in his interview with Truffaut that it showed up that very night. The night Rebecca went away, the body showed up.
That's not what happened in the book.
I don't even know what happens in the movie.
It's like several
it's like
weeks or even months later.
Right.
It shows up slightly suspiciously far away. And Maxim has to go identify it. Now, I mean, the coast off Cornwall is dangerous. Also, people did commit suicide.
Well, and they
do explicitly talk about in the book how the body was very battered.
Yeah. In the Monte Carlo scene or section, to help us establish our dark tone, we hear that somebody drowned in Monte Carlo this year. People, especially at that time, drowned more often. They didn't have lifeguards and coast guards to the same extent. It was a big problem. And so people also went out in the water a lot more. So to me, it's pretty believable. And also, unrecognized bodies of women wash up not that unfrequently. And that is an unfortunate thing that does happen in real life. I also don't totally gel with this criticism because Maxim didn't really need that body. It did help, and I think my answer is then Hitchcock, just take that body out of the story. You don't need it. You can just have it be that they never found the body, and that was it, and then they do find the body. I think the story works equally well. So, yeah, I never bought into that criticism.
Yeah, very tangentially related. I don't like that they never mention the name of Rebecca's boat in this adaptation. Her boat is named Je Reviens. I come back. It seems somewhat meaningful.
Yeah, I was surprised. I was sure that Hitchcock was just waiting for the right moment to put that in. I guess it's because it's in French and they think we don't know French.
Change it to a different English name.
Change it to I Return? That's a weird name for a boat.
Well, maybe you can change it to Je reviens. Like Maxim says, or maybe Frank says, her boat, the Je reviens, and then have Mrs. De Winter say, I come back.
Yeah, that could have worked. I was surprised that something like that wasn't in there, but that's Selznick's fault, not Hitchcock's fault.
Yeah. It would take 5 seconds to do, and I think it's very impactful. You don't even, unlike the thing I would add with Mrs. Brocklehurst's hair, you don't even have to cast a new person or make a new costume. It's so easy to include. I also didn't like how right after their wedding, when they're coming out of the registrar's office or whatever, he sort of apologizes for not giving her this big fancy wedding and buys her the biggest bouquet I've ever seen. Opposite of what Maxim in the book does.
Yeah, at least I believe in the book, when she's talking about how memories are beautiful things that you could wrap up and
bottle it up like sense.
He doesn't say, no, memories are poison bottles of pain.
Yeah, he doesn't say. that was a bit much.
That was silly.
That was a bit much. He's like, what a cute kid.
Yeah. You can't, just like in Jane Eyre, you can really see the influence of Alfred Hitchcock's silent background in this film, and I think it makes it so much better. The small amounts of stylized choreography that we're allowed to include, because the audience is still used to that, I think echoes what we've been talking for a long time now about the difficult balance between naturalism and stylization. Things like when Frank and Mrs. De Winter are sort of getting close and actually becoming friends. They go to talk and work together at the table, and they sit down in perfect synchronization with each other because they're friends now.
Well, I think that's not just because they're friends. Something that is brought up in the book is that Mrs. De Winter feels more comfortable with Frank. She's especially talking about with her maid. She feels like she fits in much more with her maid. But I think she finds Frank much easier to talk to because he's also middle class.
Right.
So that's why they're in sync, not just because they're friends.
You're right. That their friendship has a broader basis. But I love how expressive the cinematography is for that. The wind on her face, which we see in in all of the scary moments. We see that at first in Monte Carlo when she sees Maxim potentially about to jump.
Which does make sense because she's on a cliff.
But then, of course, we continue to see the wind on her face, even in these totally internal moments when anything scary happens, to restore that feeling of tension and excitement. And that's such an effective technique. I think a lot of people wouldn't even notice, but it really does work.
I really like the shot when we are going into the West Wing for the why don't you jump scene to the second time. We just shot of the hand coming towards the doorknob. I'm a fan.
The slow zoom into the morning room as she walks in and is sort of yet again intimidated by that experience. That one's really good. Even some of the wild reaction to Danvers' performance, or Anderson's performance of Danvers that has happened throughout the years, I think would make more sense if people would be less surprised if they had seen more silent movies where that style of acting is more appropriate, considering that they need to be more expressive. And I think in general, part of the reason that it appeals to me and maybe could have a comeback is, silent movies are a lot like internet memes. They are really collections of short visual things that express feelings you're supposed to identify with personally. So a silent movie is much more...
A GIF, not a meme.
Yes, thank you. That's a good way to put it. A silent movie is really a collection of GIFs, and they happen to come together to form a story. But, you're supposed to identify with the feeling of friendship expressed by the abstract sitting down together experience. The film is also really influenced by Citizen Kane, made by that guy Orson Welles from the first movie. It has, told as a prologue, introduced story after a big death has occurred, and we're sort of going back and reviewing it. It's set in this giant mansion. There's a lot of use of deep focus photography, which wasn't a big deal until Citizen Kane.
So we didn't go with our default rule of watching the older film first. In this case, we watched Jane Eyre and then Rebecca. Do you feel like that was the right move, David?
It's tough. We said that earlier. I think we might say that if you've already read the books, this was the wrong order. Because you already know that the stories influenced each other and you can compare them. And as movies, I think they're more interesting to watch in their cinematic history, in their style, and maybe just even artistically one after the other. I think Selznick expected people to maybe have seen Rebecca, and now they're going to see the sequel, Jane Eyre. Mm-hmm. So I think if you've read the books before, I would flip the order. If you haven't read the books before, then this is the right order.
I do agree. One problem is Rebecca is so much better than Jane Eyre. I think it is not essential to read the novel Rebecca before seeing this film. I think it is essential to read the novel Jane Eyre before you see, frankly, any adaptation. And unfortunately, I would say this is not a good film adaptation. If your interest is seeing Jane Eyre on screen, there are several far superior choices. So if you do have to watch these together, I think half of the time you're going to be having a bad time. And so you have to decide whether you want that to be up front or at the end. Well, if you like the legal drama of these two films, I have good news for next month's episode. David, what are we watching?
We are watching Michael Clayton from 2007 and Erin Brokovich from 2000.